Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. We will be at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, to preview this game coming up on Sunday. Doors open at 11. Show starts at 10. So whether you are coming hang out with us in person or you are just listening or watching the radio, Odyssey app, YouTube, make sure that you check us out on Sunday morning. Okay, the offense for Washington. I would love to see them generate some big plays themselves. That has been the thing that has been missing the last couple of weeks. This Miami defense doesn't get talked about a lot because the offense gets talked about ad nauseum. But they've got some really talented guys and have been playing pretty well on that side of the ball as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think, they were kind of okay, and then Jalen Ramsey came back and they were really good. They got a guy that understands that scheme at a high level and he's playing good football. And then they've got some like Howard on the other side is a good football player, Holland in the back end at the safety, and they've got guys, all those guys I just mentioned have tremendous ball skills. And one thing about a Vic Fangio defense is they are going to play coverage. They're going to kind of dare you to run the football, and they have guys that understand what they're doing back there really, really well. And they can disguise coverage as well. Their man looks like they're 6, their 6 looks like they're 3, and they're always going to – the one thing I would say is constant with this group is that they do a really good job of making sure they have numbers in coverage situations. So you got 3 receivers, they're going to have 4 defenders. You got 2 receivers, they're going to have 3, right? They're always going to be a little bit light in run support because of it, but their defensive line's been playing really good. Specifically, Wilkins inside is one of the best interior defensive players in the NFL. And they do a good job of creating pressure with 4. And they do blitz a lot on third down. They bring some exotic stuff and make it challenging. But when I look at, and I think Jalen Phillips being out, number 15 for them, is a big
loss for them last week. Went down in that Black Friday game.
And obviously that's tough for them. I feel bad for Jalen, but obviously that's good for the Commanders because he was a big reason they were able to consistently generate pressure. It's going to be tough, I think, for Sam. This is like one of the tougher defenses, Vic Fangio is the godfather of modern defense, essentially, over the last probably 5 or 6 years. So He's really good at it, and he's got guys who are really good at it. And it's going to be a challenge for Sam, quite frankly, to make sure he's dialed in.
Every defense has some sort of weakness, though, or a potential exposure area. What is it like when teams attack a Vic Fangio defense successfully? Where are they able to tear it apart?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because they've done really good jobs against good football teams. They held Kansas City, I think, to 21 points, something like that. Lots of defensive scores. They held Philly, I think, to 24. Like, they do a good job, man. They're really good. And what I'd say in terms of exposure is he's daring you to run the ball. He's daring you to do it. So run the ball, get them out of those complicated coverage structures in the back end, force them to declare what they're showing you, and then pick them apart. I think it's kind of a mistake, at least I would think right now. And again, I haven't watched as much film as EB has, but I would think it's a mistake to try and throwing the football the way that they've done the past couple of weeks. I think you want to slow this game down, possess the football, run the heck out of the ball. And again, we've talked about our beliefs on running the football, converting on first down or third down, is going to be a big part of this game. But I think that's something you really want to see. Efficient running. Don't go crazy throwing the ball out the gate because you need to simplify what they're doing defensively and then try to stay out of third down because they get even more exotic on third down. So this is a very good defense, very disciplined defense, well-coached defense. It's not like the Giants, which is like this crazy, it's challenging in a different way. It's challenging in its nuance. It's challenging in the pictures it presents. So I think it's going to be a really, really interesting barometer for Sam, especially after we were talking about kind of all the things we want to see from him. Like, can you read coverages? Can you get through your progressions? And there'll be an opportunity to do this. But just remember, these dudes that I just mentioned, the DBs specifically, are excellent at disguising it and excellent at passing stuff off and excellent at executing it. So,
did you have coaches that when you played a team with a bunch of ball hawks would like basically tell you to be, or tell the quarterbacks to be more risk averse, or do you have to let guys play? Because I feel like that's a fine line. Because when it's a little bit of a, hey, don't think about a pink elephant, type of thing, where if you're like, hey, be really careful, they'll intercept you, you get too cautious and you don't see something that you're supposed to because you're not playing free, you're not reading it out, you're not going through your process with the mental clarity that you typically would. But at the same time, you do need to be extra cautious and maybe think twice about throwing that deep ball because the chances of an interception versus just an incompletion are a little bit higher. But you also don't want, again, miss opportunities. So there's this constant seesaw balance. So against a super aggressive ball hawking type of defense, how did your coaches typically handle that?
So yeah, usually you'd say it depends on who it is, but like they'd probably make reference to a guy that's got a bunch of interceptions and the duration and the type of interceptions that he's had. And when I say duration, like when were they? Were they early in the season? Were they late in the season? Probably go over the type of plays they were on, and then they'll tell you whether they think they're legitimate interceptions or not. And I think that's always something that is really interesting when it comes to that stuff. It's like when the coach says these aren't real, like it's a tip pass or the receiver fell down, like we don't think he's that good. Like Trayvon Diggs, when he was a rookie, he had a couple picks. I think he had 6 picks. I remember Kyle was like, he has 6 picks, but we're going to dice this guy up. Like, and that was his like approach. So like, it didn't matter to him. The picks didn't matter at all. He's like, we're going to make him be a rookie. And then there's other guys who are like, oh, like Jalen Ramsey's got 5 picks and, he gave up a touchdown last week, but like, we're going to be aware where he's at on the field. And, like the quarterback, don't stress about it, but we're going to make sure we kind of have a vision on what he's doing. And we're going to call concepts to make sure we're not putting you in a bad spot, So the quarterback doesn't have to worry about it, but definitely the coaching staff's aware of it. If they deem the guy talented enough, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see what they do because I think that there is probably a desire to generate some of those big plays down the field that they haven't had. But at the same time, like you said, just being smart, running the football, keeping – because the other thing, too, is like the game flow situation I feel like is so important because Miami is so explosive. And if they just get out ahead – and it's not like some teams where if they start running the football too early, you can get back into the game. Like if Miami starts running it, like I almost feel like that's game over. I almost rather them try to pass the ball and dink and dunk it and see if you can frustrate them and tackle in space, although – obviously the problem with Miami is there's no good answers. You're just facing a juggernaut in all phases. And that's why they're one of the best teams in football. And they are extremely balanced in all facets. Like there's not a great area to attack them with your offense. And they are very good running and passing with their offense. And that just makes for a long day unless you're their equal, which is why they've only lost to some of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think the other thing you see in the Bills game and the Eagles game is turnovers. Turnovers hurt them, and it was fumbles when in the Bills game. And Raheem, I played with him in San Fran, and he is as explosive as you can think of. Right, he's one of the most explosive guys in football. He's awesome.
Most you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And but he does fumble the ball. That's been an issue since I've known him. I played with him when he was a second year in Chicago. I was with him, and that was something they always talked about with him, like protecting the ball. So you can get some there, right? And Tua has been pretty fastidious with the football, but he's also made some kind of bad decisions. Like if you look at the Philly game, the reason they win that game is because Philly gets a late interception in the red zone, and then Jalen Hurts and that Philly offense possess the football and they win the game. So capitalize on those moments. I think they had 2 turnovers against Kansas City or something like that. So that's a huge part of this. And I hate that as analysis because the question is, how do you create those turnovers? You know what I'm saying? And that's where Ron has to earn his paycheck. But I do think when you look at offensively, like there is a roadmap. And I think it's a little bit more simplistic when you really look at it. It's like take away the first read, compress the throwing window, and make them hold the football a little bit. And it seems like that's very common. But in this case, because the O-line is so inconsistent, like you can get some good stuff happening off of that. So I do think there's a path, but like you said, I think this defense has not played very well. They haven't stopped the run well. They haven't defended the pass well. So is that something?
They haven't gotten pressure.
Something
they don't press? So like it's asking them to do a bunch of stuff that they haven't done. The path might be there, but by the way, also you slip up and you try to press and you're on Tyreek Hill and then you miss one tackle on a slant and good night.
That was another thing that really stood out to me is the reliance of these teams on their safeties in these games. You could see the corners like talking and pointing and waving guys over, and it's the communication level was so high. They're so aware of what they're having to do here because they're up pretty tight. They're not pressing all the time, but they're within 5 yards. They're trying to take away that slant. They're trying to take away the 5 yard out, all that kind of stuff. And so they're really relying on those guys in the back end to make them right. And to this kind of general point, Percy has done some good things the last 3 weeks. he's also given up some big plays, right? So can this simplified defense that Ron has been talking about allow these guys to play fast and be in the right position? Big if for sure.
Big if, and he's only had 1 week to install it, so we'll see how it goes. We'll talk about all this and more with Mark Schlereth next here on Take Command. It is our pleasure to welcome back to the show for the first time in a while our guy Ben Standig. Ben, how are you, sir?
Craig, I'm doing all right, man. How about yourself?
Doing well, man. Doing well. So your outfit, the Athletic, published with your guy Dane Brugler their first mock draft today, which I think out of like the main outlets, I feel like this is the first one I've seen. Hey, are you guys like trying to be first, or did I just miss a bunch of other ones?
I can't even keep track. As we know, mock drafts are like podcasts. Everyone seems to have one.
Yeah.
So I don't even know anymore in terms of some of the bigger names who's put out what, but obviously Dane is one of the more respected guys. So, it's his first one, and obviously the college football regular season has just ended. So I guess in that respect, it's a good time to, take that perspective of what he's learned and put it out there to the public domain.
Yeah, no doubt. And so he has the Commanders taking offensive tackle from Penn State, Olu Fashanu. And I think it's interesting, Ben, just kind of globally as we talk about this, to remind the audience that everything we do in terms of Washington projection between now and at least mid-January is really, hey, we think this would be a good idea for them, because the people that are going to make these picks aren't in their jobs yet. They're still working for other teams. There will be a new GM. That GM will hire some new front office people. There'll be a new head coach, yada, 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 down the list. But what do you think, without knowing like what scheme they're going to run and all the other things, of the idea of going tackle, and what does that mean for Charles Leno, the cap situation, and kind of the bigger picture of the Commanders as they embark on the next rebuild?
Yeah, I mean, like, to your point, we don't know who's making the decision and what their approach would be. And, maybe more specifically, we don't know what they think of Sam Howell. And that's obviously going to be a huge question. It's amazing. Even a week ago, right before the Giants game, I don't think any of us were thinking this team would be picking fifth, which is currently where their projection is. But life moves fast, and that's where they are. And now that does bring quarterback into play. But since we don't know what to make of that, right? I mean, and there were other quarterbacks picked fairly high in the draft after the first two guys went 1 and 3. It's probably easy to say, let's give Washington a tackle right now, because we know the offensive line has got to be in a position that they look to help out this year. So that makes it a little bit easier there. And as far as what it would mean for Charles Leno in particular, look, he's got a pretty big cap number. Obviously, there are ways to lower that, extension, or do some other things that you can manipulate the cap with, but he would seem like a logical cap casualty or potential one just based on the numbers and kind of where this team is right now. So taking an offensive lineman or offensive tackle at 5, I haven't studied enough to know whether this is the guy to get, but obviously based on the lists you see in the rankings, he's right up there along with Alt from Notre Dame. So makes sense in that regard. And, I don't think anybody would complain about them taking tackle unless there is a feeling that, hey, they've got to go quarterback if given the opportunity.
Right. What do you think Sam has to do to stave off that conversation over these final 5 games?
I mean, as simplistic as this sounds, I just kind of think look the part and continue to show development. As bad as the game was on Thursday against Dallas, I thought Howell, particularly in the first half, looked the part, looked fine. He had some really nice throws on the drive that he capped with his own touchdown run right before Dallas immediately came back, scored, and then the game kind of got away in the second half. They've got tough defenses coming up. Even this game against Miami, we're not viewing the Dolphins from the defensive perspective because their offense is so scary, but their defense has been pretty good. They've got a couple of excellent cornerbacks led by Jalen Ramsey, but they've got a legit defense. If Sam Howell, forget the win and the loss, if Sam Howell can go out there, look poised as he has been this year, make plays, he's got to limit the turnovers. I think he's like second in the league in interceptions, has thrown 2 pick sixes in consecutive games. do his best to limit the mistakes. If he can do these things over the remaining 5 games, that might be enough combined with his other positive attributes to say this is a guy we need to continue looking at, especially knowing he's got this cheap contract. But, at the end of the day, the guys that are going to be in this draft who are going to be picked in the top 10 will all be coming out of college with a higher grade than Sam Howell did when he came out. And therefore the question will be, does Howell project, forget the 5th round part, but does Howell projection compare with what scouts and others are seeing with these players? If the answer is no, that he falls short,
right,
that's where it's going to be tough almost no matter what he does, I would think.
No, 100%. And I think that becomes such a scary proposition. And this is why scouts get paid what they get paid and why GMs get paid so much money, is because, Sam was a 5th rounder. Purdy was the last pick in the draft. And I would argue that of the quarterbacks that came out the last 2 years, those are 2 of the top 3, with C.J. Stroud being above both of them. Obviously, Richardson's hurt. Young's in a terrible situation in Carolina. You can pick apart some certain numbers and say that Kenny Pickett actually has been better than Sam Howell. I think most people, certainly around here, would take Howell over Pickett. But the point is, Sam's actually, as you said, mostly looked the part. And so I am curious when a new person comes in and dives into the numbers and goes beyond the fact that he leads the league in yards, because that's a counting accumulation stat. He also leads the league, as you referenced, in interceptions at this point. How does it actually play out in terms of the deeper numbers and what they see from a process standpoint? How does the leadership stuff play into it? Ron was talking about that with the maturity today. And when you add all that up, I feel, Ben, that's actually going to be hard to beat from a prospect who isn't very clearly elite.
Yeah, it's like you said, it is really going to be fascinating. Just to sort of broaden out the topic, as you and I are looking for content all the time, and we will be looking for a lot of it in the off season. And we knew we were going to have a lot already because of the expected coaching change in the front office and all that stuff. The quarterback thing seemed to not resolved itself, but it felt like, okay, if Washington's picking in the somewhere after the 10th pick, that Sam Howell would make logical sense to stay with him. And the fact that now this drop in the standings has put them back in the mix for a quarterback at the highest levels. They will be close enough, if they were to stay at 5, to trade up for Caleb Williams at 1 if that's what they wanted to do. Should the Bears or whoever is holding the number 1 pick, should they be willing to make a call? That is a conversation I didn't think we were having, and that's why it is going to be incredibly interesting and important for these guys to figure out what to make of the traits of these quarterbacks, like you said, not just how they throw the ball, but being a leader on offense of the team. How do they handle pressure? How do they take the coaching? All these things will go into it. At least the organization has that sense of that with Hal, except if they do clean house, then none of those people will in theory be around. Right. So, now it goes back to a whole other component of evaluation. So, it will be really fascinating to see how this plays out. And, that to me, these, I wrote the other day, these final 5 games can be a slog unless you view it for what it is. It's sort of evaluating how, and kind of the beginning of the Josh Harris era in terms of starting to get a feel for where this thing may go.
Ben Standig from The Athletic with us. One more question for him on the way out. Same kind of thought line, but on defense. How do you think that the simplification of what Ron is going to be asking these defenders to do compared to the mass confusion that was this entire season under Del Rio can help the evaluations on that side of the ball? Or is it kind of just a wash and the next people are going to come in and take whatever evaluations they had of these players previously, and that's what they're going to think of them?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it is always kind of a weird thing when you hear coaches say we need to simplify things. That may help short term, but I always feel that sort of doesn't sound great for the longer term view. What was it so what were they doing? Calculus in the huddle? What is so complicated that things were so bad that we've seen explosive plays allowed all season long? But okay, if in the short term Rivera thinks they need to simplify things, limit the amount of plays in the playbook for the given week, will help. Sure. They got 5 games to go. The Miami game is an unbelievable.
That was Anthony mishitting a button, Ben. You can keep going.
Say, Miami makes it such a daunting challenge for them right off the bat. So if simplifying the playbook and everything makes it easier to deal with them, I mean, great, go ahead and do it. But in terms of the bigger picture evaluations, you're right. We'll see to what degree he does that, changes things, that it alters perceptions or evaluations of any of these players. And look, I think a real big question is going to be, what do they actually have? I mean, if you just look at the defense, obviously they traded away the 2 defensive ends. He's got the 2 tackles. Then what? Like, I don't know what to make of the rest of the unit, knowing that guys like Fuller and Curl are free agents. I'd argue they probably need 2 linebackers. Do they have to draft another cornerback or sign another cornerback high, considering what Forbes has been this year? They have a lot of questions, and hopefully at least they get some more clarity, whoever's making the call over these last 5 games.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like I like some of the talent a little bit better than you do, but I also I don't feel strongly about any of it because the results are what they are. I said that was the last question, and then Anthony did whatever he just did. So now I have another question for you, Ben. You get to play referee, which I know is your just lifelong dream. We have a fine system here on the show, and it's kind of like penalties in the NFL. There's 5-yard varieties, 10-yard varieties, and 15-yard varieties, and we just do 5 points, 10 points, or 15 points. Is Anthony editing a clip onto the air in the middle of a guest, and it happens to be the guest who's refereeing this question's answer, a 5, 10, or 15-point penalty? Wow.
Great question. And I don't have Dean Blandino to reference here. Look, part of me wants to, you got to have the kids learn their lessons. Part of me wants to give the 15, but look, Anthony's a young kid. He's trying hard. I'm gonna give him the 5 and just tell him, don't do it again, or you're gonna have to, talk to me about it.
What kind of youth league referee garbage is this? We're a professional radio show, Ben.
I appreciate you, Ben.
You're not here to try hard. We're here to perform. All right, fine. 5 points. I said he's the referee. I will respect the decision. I will argue the call later. I will say thank you for your football insight, and I will question your referee.
Well, you can ask New York, you can throw the flag, have it challenge it. I mean, that's fair.
All right, we'll deal with that later. Well, maybe I'll appeal to Dave Johnson next. I think that's what I'll do. Ben, thank you for the time. Thank you for the time. I'll see you Sunday in the press box.
Yeah, man. See ya.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Welcome in on a Sunday morning, a pretty miserable Sunday morning in the district as the rain is coming down, but it's supposed to clear up by kickoff of Commanders and Dolphins. This is the Take Command pregame show. We are streaming live, not just on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980 on your radios, but on the free Odyssey app and on YouTube at 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980 on a burgundy and gold game day. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. We're with you for the next 3 hours getting you ready for Commanders and Dolphins. And, you know, Logan, we could be snarky and say, oh, I don't know if we need that much time to preview this one with the way these two teams are playing. But it is a critically important time for the Commanders this final month of the season. Sure, it might not be for playoff contention, but there is a ton of evaluation to do, and we're going to get into a lot of that today as well. You know, has the offense stagnated? Why is that happening? Where is Sam Howell now compared to where he started this season? These are some of the things that we're going to tackle today on the show and kind of frame that through what we want to see in the game going into, obviously, the very late as it possibly could be, bye week. But the big question today, Logan, is what can Ron Rivera do with this defense? Obviously, after the last game, Jack Del Rio was dismissed the following morning, all the way back on Thanksgiving. And now, Logan, Ron Rivera has tried to pare down, simplify this defense, which I think is great in terms of an evaluation standpoint. Like, line up, play fast, play physical. Let's see what you got. Young players, Cam Curl trying to earn a contract, Benjamin St. Juste trying to reestablish himself as a really quality corner, similar to what he's played like in the past compared to all the plays he's given up this season. Yeah. Obviously, Emmanuel Forbes, eventually he's out today, but all these guys trying to reestablish themselves and be put in positions to succeed. What can Ron do to help that happen, even if the task today versus Miami is monumental?
Yeah, well, I think, they've been playing a lot of man coverage, and I think that's kind of, against the Miami defense specifically, would not be the best approach, just kind of regardless. Yes. So I think you'll probably see a little bit more zone, a little bit more cover three. Just cover three because I think Ron ran that when he was in Carolina, or that was the defensive coordinator's kind of approach when he was in Carolina, and he called a couple games the tail end of that season, kind of to help the young defensive play caller figure it out there. So I do think there's that's what I would expect to see today. And hopefully what you can get is just a simplified, regulated defensive structure. You need multiple, so I don't want to say just singular, but multiple defensive structures that allow these guys to play faster than they've been playing and play more confident, put them in better situations to be successful. Because we talked about Benjamin St. Juste and his struggles, and then, you watch that Seattle-Dallas Cowboys game and on Thursday night this week, and you just see how good Dak Prescott's playing, how good CeeDee Lamb is. Like that backfield or that secondary for Seattle's very, very good.
They're awesome.
And they got diced up. So I think understanding, hey, we can play man in certain situations, but how do I maximize those man-to-man opportunities? You got to kind of create consternation in the quarterback, create consternation in the offense. So that's what I'm hoping for today. And we've talked about this a couple times on the podcast, is just can we get simplified defenses, kind of say, hey, these are our 4 defenses we're going to play today, so that we can own our adjustments to all the defenses. Right. Because every defense has to kind of adjust and adapt to what the offense is doing. And today, with all the motion and pre-snap stuff Miami's going to do, I think that'd be the go-to anyway. So I think it's the right approach by Ron, kind of regardless.
Yeah, and so let's kind of define a couple of things here. I think first of all, when you talk about simplifying and paring down, as Logan said, you're talking about playing less stuff. So you might have had not just cover 2, cover 3, cover 1, some cover 0 blitzes, cover 6s, cover 9s. You're playing all this quarter, half, all this kind of stuff, and let's scrap some of that. But even within those, there was kind of subcategories. You might have played a cover 2 carry. You might have played just a regular cover 2, some cover 2 man. And so you're going to eliminate some of those. But I think on a bigger deal, Logan, and this is going to be interesting, especially today, is you take some of the zone match stuff, or you take some of the checks at the line of scrimmage, and you just scrap them. And you say, we're going to line up. The call in the huddle was, I'll use cover 3. Yeah. Cover 3, we're going to play a basic cover 3, 3 deep, 4 underneath. If they motion, that's fine. We're still playing cover 3. If this route combination attacks us, where we used to zone match it and try to figure out what the route combination was, and we might have missed passing something off, we might not have the perfect solution, but we're just going to guard our areas. It looks much more like the circles on Madden than it does trying to truly match it. And then does that mean you give up some completions because you're not exactly on a guy like you might have been in a zone match system? Maybe, but you rally, you tackle, and at least someone's not running wide open because two guys went one way, and all of a sudden you've got a vacated space over here for Tyreek Hill, God forbid, to run into.
Yep.
And so there's just this simplification and paring down that takes the thinking out of it. We don't have to think about matching. We don't have to think about that. We just react. We go to our area. We go to our space. Or if you're playing man, I cover my man, and you understand how to pass things off within that. And it should, on the back end, make things a lot simpler. And I think that's going to be a huge factor for what they do, not just today, but the rest of the season.
Yeah, and like with anything, there's a certain level of nuance. So, when you say we're playing cover 3 and it's like the circles on Madden, that defense traditionally has a really hard time, versus modern offenses because there are these natural voids. So within every zone, there is a kind of man or a match principle. It's just about making sure everyone's on the same page. I think it's like in the context of that. Hey, we're not just going to spot drop like the old Seattle 3 used to do. You have to match concepts a little bit. And so I think you'll see, you'll probably see more of that. But the idea is that can we get it so that we feel very comfortable and confident with matching those patterns and with our coverage rules. And I think that's ultimately what I want to see today is can you, whatever they're calling, like I don't care what you call. You could call engage 8. You can call max, whatever we're doing. What are our answers versus different formations, and do the guys look confident like they're playing fast? Like that is really all it comes down to.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying.
No, I know you are.
To an extent, asking too is like, where in a lot of defenses now, okay, they've whether it's by numbers, so like they motion now you went from 2x2 to 3x1.
Yeah.
That's an automatic check to a quarters coverage or whatever it is. Or, hey, oh my God, they're in a bunch. They're in a stack. We have a certain thing that's this way. I think that stuff is going to be gone. And it's like instead of having to communicate a check, we're just going to stay with where we were. And it might be a suboptimal call on paper, but the games aren't played on paper. They're played with guys who have to talk and communicate and change things. And if one guy misses a check, that's how you wind up with a coverage bust and giving up an easy touchdown.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we called cover 3. Normally, or in the old system, we'd check this to a cover 4 because they motion to a bunch.
Right.
Or we would in and out and shift to man. We're just not going to do that anymore. And it might cause us a little bit of consternation, but at least we're confident in what we're supposed to be doing. And we didn't have to communicate something, so half the defense is doing one thing and half the defense is doing the other.
Yeah, and I think, like, just to kind of be a little bit more specific with that, I don't think they were doing a lot of that specific stuff. I think they had, like, where, like, the linebacker taps his helmet and is like, hey, man, we're in quarters over here now. I think it was all kind of sight adjustment based.
Which actually is harder because you're not even
harder.
Communicated. It's just like, hey, they did this. Everybody's on the same page.
Right. No, and I think, like, that level of communication. And, again, like, this is what happens. Like, you can simplify. So now as the middle linebacker, I can communicate 3x1, and I kind of know what the DB is supposed to do. I know how that call is supposed to echo. So I think there will still be there has to be checks and has to be adjustments in defense. Like that's how it works. But I think the level of check,
there's less of that.
The comprehensive nature of like what we're doing, we're still kind of operating in the same circle. We're just kind of moving like like a old like Venn diagram type deal. We're moving into different parts of the circle based on what the defense is presenting, but we're still kind of in cover 3 or whatever. The basic rules of cover 3, because you can't play true 3 to a 3x1 because they'll kill you, right? So we have to kind of tell the backside corner or the backside hook player you have to match the vertical if it comes. You know what I'm saying? So there are just innate adjustments. But what I will say is that if you're simpler, like if you think about Miami, the old Miami Hurricanes back in when they were really rolling in college, right?
Yeah, 2001.
They played cover 2 every single snap, and they had good athletes, but they knew every single adjustment to every single route combination they can get. Seattle, when they were rolling, back in the early 2010s,
yeah. Legion of Boom,
when you talk to those guys, they said we knew how to adjust to everything they were presenting. So I think if you can get kind of that foundational defensive call in and just say this is what we're going to spend most of our time in. If they line up in this, this is how we match it. And I think just kind of that simplicity is really important. You're going to have other calls, right?
Right. So perhaps better put, instead of they motion to a 3x1, we're shifting to cover 4.
Right.
We're going to stay in our cover 3, but we understand how to bend that cover 3.
And to me, that I think is going to be so important, because what you see is the motion, teams of motion to a bunch, and we're playing match or we're playing man or we're playing 3, and we don't know our rules in a bunch, right?
Yeah.
So now hopefully we've pared it down enough where hey, they're in a bunch. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what the response is. And you're right, it might not be the perfect response, but at least I know, and the other guys that I'm playing with know what they're going to do. So I think that's something today that I really want to see, because there's times where I'm just like, poor Benjamin St. This is not maximizing him. This is not maximizing Kendall Fuller. This
or
is not
anybody.
Not maximizing Percy Butler. And it's hard to do that all the time, but I think one of the simpler ways to do that, if you see all this stuff, if you have all these checks, you have all this noise, this white noise, just like clear that signal up and say, this is our solution. And then you can give Cody Barton the opportunity and the power and the responsibility to be like, hey, if we don't know something, we're going to check to cover 3 because we know that.
Right.
And I think when you talk to London Fletcher and Fred Smoot, those defenses that they played on, back in the 90s and the early 2000s were very simple, very, very simple, and because offenses were simpler. But that underlying principle is the same. It's like we knew in this coverage we were home. That was our base. Like we felt very comfortable there. We could match anything. And there's stuff like that you see offensively. Like I remember when I was with Kyle here in 10-13 when he was here, and our offensive line coach, Chris Forrester, was like, if we're ever having a hard time, I know we can call outside zone because you guys just know what to do versus everything. And it's very calming for the offense because it's not like, oh, we're in this kind of crazy game plan run. What's our check? It's like, no, we're just going to call base outside zone, settle everyone down, and get the offense rolling. And I think there's an element of that to the defense too. It's like, this is our base. We know how to handle everything in there. And I just feel like they have not been doing that the last couple of weeks. So I think we're kind of saying the same thing. We're hoping to see that confidence from that group in terms of communication and assignment today.
Yeah, if you make a mistake, make it quickly.
Yes.
And, you play faster and you can make up for stuff, and that's obviously the goal today. Now, we just spent all that time on the back end. The bigger problem might be the front end. We'll get to that later in the show. How can the Commanders generate some pressure today? It can be very, very difficult against Tua Tagovailoa because he gets rid of the ball literally the fastest in the entire NFL, between 2.3 and 2.4 seconds on average. But, Logan, when you watch the tape, you did see some potential vulnerability there. We'll talk about that a little later in the show. We flip the field next, though. Sam Howell, obviously still putting up huge numbers in terms of volume, but how effective has he been really, and where are we with 5 games to go in the evaluation on him and Eric Bieniemy? We'll discuss next on the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Take Command Pregame show alongside Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman on a burgundy and gold game day, 106.7 The Fan, the team 980. Logan, the Commanders' offense has had a more productive year than the previous three under Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
Eric Bieniemy to Scott Turner for sure. But from Scott Turner to Eric Bieniemy for sure in terms of the production. But they've obviously got a young quarterback, and there's so many different factors that go into that. And as we sit here in first weekend of December and try to evaluate how they've been, I think it's been an interesting to watch their trajectory because they were so good early. They put up the 35 to beat the Broncos in week 2. And they put up 30 on Philly in the loss, and they've had a couple of those games where they put up a ton of points, but feels like that hasn't happened in a while. They haven't hit some big explosive plays in a while, and obviously last weekend against Dallas, or Thanksgiving against Dallas, it's about as bad as they've been all year. Sans the Buffalo game, 45-10 is the final, and that 10 number is not exactly great. That said, they're passing the ball a ton. Sam Howell leads the league in passing, also happens to lead the league in interceptions, so completions and
it's
interceptions.
a volume thing, right?
Yeah, when you lead the league in attempts, a lot of those passes are going to someone. 13 of them to the wrong team, but many, many hundreds to his guys. How have you seen? Like we figured the offense would grow throughout the year.
Yeah.
But as we sit here preparing for this Week 13 tilt, what do you think the trajectory line has been for this Commanders offense, and then why do you think it's been that way?
So I'm going to push back a little bit, just ever so slightly, because I do agree that it's kind of been this, up and down kind of. There's been an up and down nature to the offense, but I think when you look at the New England game, look at the Seattle game. There have been games intersprinkled in the last, 4 or 5 that have been very productive offensively. We talked about the Seattle game in our review, there was a big chunk of that game where they weren't productive, and all of a sudden they were productive, kind of specifically the fourth quarter. And they do find big plays. And so, I think there's this kind of knee-jerk reaction, even by myself, to be like, oh, man, they're regressing, Sam's regressing, they're not doing what they need to do. But I also remember, talking with some of the smartest offensive minds in the current landscape of football, and just talking about how difficult it is to kind of flush out an offense in a year. And it's just such an important reminder that this is still the first year with a new offensive coordinator. First time him independently calling plays. I'm sure he called plays in Kansas City, but
something that he pushed back on this week when John Keim asked him about it. He's like, "Hey, what's your how's it going? What's your growth been like this year and your first time calling plays?" And Eric goes, well, "This is my 6th year, so thanks for asking."
And I understand that pushback, but it's different. It's different not having the scaffolding and foundational piece of Andy Reid. One of the most, maybe the best offensive coordinator in football. So I do think it's going to be different, but. When Kyle was here in 2010, we were bad in the red zone. We were like the number 4 offense in terms of total yards produced. I think we were 26th or 27th in red zone production, and we were 26th and 27th in third down conversion. So we were kind of finding these chunk plays, and if we couldn't find the chunk plays, we couldn't maximize red zone. We couldn't maximize third down. I think when you look at, and this offense has shades of that. You know what I mean? There's elements of that, and I think one of the reasons you see that with new offenses oftentimes and a young quarterback is the details are a little bit tighter in those situations, right? The receivers split, the receivers depth, the pick, the rub, the understanding what the coverage is. It's a little bit tighter. Sam's got to accelerate his footwork, all that stuff, and that takes time to learn. So I think you're still seeing a productive offense. I think when you look at the Dallas game, for example, there are productive elements there, right? But that's one of the best defenses in football, coupled with one of the most, at the moment anyway, the hottest offense in football. And so you're going to have some challenges. But, they had, almost 300 yards. They had 300 yards, almost 300 yards passing. They had about 100 yards rushing or some crazy statistic, right? They held the ball for a long time.
They had 37 minutes of time of possession, but only 10 points.
Right. And I think when you look at, obviously game flow there is a big factor, and they made some of those decisions because the defense isn't playing well. But I do think there has been positive offensive progression if we're just looking at incremental progress. Now, I think your point is still valid, 100%, right?
Well, I would say I didn't even make a point. I just threw out some potential hypothesis points and asked you which ones were correct.
Right.
But which I think is kind of the interesting thing, because the point I would make is I feel like how this offense has shifted throughout the year. I feel like at the beginning of the year, the scheme really was elevating a lot of the players. And I feel like at this point that dynamic has shifted, and specifically around Sam, which is both good and bad. It's definitely better than the alternative because I think the most important thing for this franchise is Sam playing well, and if you can not have to spend whatever pick you wind up with in April on a quarterback, like that's fantastic. If you can buttress your roster around him and build around Sam, especially with the cheap contract the next couple of years and him playing at a pretty high level, like you're cooking. This job becomes even more attractive than it already is with all the assets, the new owner that everyone seems to think is very smart and would be great to work for, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what's happened is, like, Sam, a lot of the big plays they've been able to find are Sam making them off schedule. Sam's elevating this offense. Sam's creating a lot of this production versus earlier in the year, it's like, wow, look at all these open guys. Wow, look at how this scheme is doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, defenses have kind of caught on to a lot of what they're doing. And I think the Dallas game, obviously Dallas is tremendous defensively, but you think of some other games recently as well, Seattle certainly amongst them, where you have these
lulls.
You have these lulls and you have these matching defenses that seem to know exactly what's coming, that seem to know, hey, in this situation, they like to call this. They're able to latch on, cover it up. If Sam can then extend a play and throw something sidearm, you can still generate a big play. But it's also made, I think, things much more difficult to get the ball to Terry and Jahan. And, it's interesting looking at the stats because, myself included, a lot of people are going, hey, you got to get the ball to 17 more. Well, you look at the target numbers, and the target numbers are actually there, but they can't get him in easier situations to just get him the ball as opposed to just giving him 50-50 at best opportunities or throwing the ball over his head and having that, rack up the targets.
Yeah.
So I think that's been what's interesting in terms of the evolution is, I think, on a great positive note, Sam has continually grown and gotten better. And, of course, Eric deserves a lot of credit for that as the primary guy driving this offense. At the same time, I don't know that the scheme is necessarily evolved in the way that you'd want to this year, and they've necessarily figured out the best way to play to score and win games now.
Yeah, I think you brought up a ton of stuff there. So let's start with kind of the general offensive regression. And I think when you look at, like, Miami, look at the Miami Dolphins, for example, their offense has regressed too.
Yeah.
They're not putting up, crazy numbers every week.
When you score 70, there's only one way to go.
I'd say outside of the first 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
They've kind of come back to earth and they look more normal. Like when you're doing evaluations on them, are they a good offense? Yeah. Are they well coached? Yeah. But have teams found ways to corral them? Have teams, 3 times this year have found ways to really quiet them down and win the football game? So I think there is a level of defensive adaptation. The more film you have, the more adjustment, the more kind of stuff you can do to kind of put your guys in a good position to be successful. And, and I think we talked about in the Dallas game, one of the things that stuck out to me was there are throws there, right? They're not to Terry or to Jahan, but it's working your progression, right? It's like we've got CO with the drive, and the CO's dead, like throw the drive. And that's an evolution for a young quarterback. And we talked about how Sam does a really good job of maximizing and finding explosive plays and doing all these things. But there's also times, probably in this last game against Dallas, and again, Dallas with that great pass rush, it kind of makes sense that this would happen, is just simply understanding where the ball needs to go versus certain coverage. And that comes with experience and that comes with time. And I think about Jalen Hurts, for example, as a really good proxy for what Sam is right now, where he has a fairly productive year. There's some holes in his games in terms of working progression. Jalen Hurts' holes are different than Sam's holes.
Right.
But I think about as he gets more experience in this offense, that becomes maximized. Like when you look at the concept when Kansas City runs it, Mahomes hits the guy splitting the safeties for a 60-yard touchdown, right? Here, not so much, because Sam's still understanding where and how the ball needs to get to where it needs to go. Like we talked about, the nuance of the quarterback position.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit of both. Now, again, it's layered and it's gray. Can EB do more to maximize Sam? I would say probably yes. And I think EB would probably say yes too, right? And that's like when you watch San Fran, when you watch Houston, when you watch Miami, they're doing that every single play. And so and EB's not that guy. That's not what this offense is. That's not what this Kansas City offense does. But can he do it 15% more of the time? Probably. And I think, like you alluded to kind of early in the year, how they were able to find some good matchups based on formation, based on motion, based on whatever, maybe get back to some of that stuff. But also I think that EB deserves some credit because they've really leaned into the quick game. And Sam seems to have grown with that. So it might not be quite as sexy, but including more quick game, including more rollout, has been good for Sam. So there has been some adjustment in the offense. It's just about, it's like, what is the right thing to do? When is the right thing to do? How much of it is the defense is just getting more familiar in this like natural offensive regression as the season goes on?
There's actually something that Eric said this week in terms of the run game that I thought was pretty telling in the way he said it. So we'll get to that coming up in Coach Speak at 10:45. But next, our friend Kevin Sheehan joins us. This line is down to 8.5. 8.5, which you'd think that it'd be a 10, 12, 15-point game. How much of this is due to the weather? Well, if we're talking about gambling and weather, who better to talk to than Kevin Sheehan? So Sheehan will join us next here on the Take Command pregame show. We're live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, where the doors open in just 30 minutes. Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor on a burgundy and gold game day. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. The doors open here at Tap in just under 30 minutes. We're with you live until 1 p.m. on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. And 30 minutes into the show, each and every week, it's our pleasure to welcome in our good friend Kevin Sheen. Kevin, good morning, sir. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. How you doing?
What's up, boys? Hope yours was well. That seemed like ages ago now.
Yeah.
And then the next time we have this conversation, it'll seem like ages since the last one. It's the bye week. It's finally coming.
Yes, a Week 14 bye, just as every player dreams of.
Like last year.
I mean, it's insane because also this team, I guess they had the Thursday nighter against Chicago, which you get the little mini bye, and you get a mini bye after Thanksgiving, but it's like mini bye, one game, and then bye.
That's a wacky bit.
Doesn't seem very fun. Dallas has to do this. I think obviously they play on the Thursday night on Thanksgiving often. There's so many years where they'll have like 2 mini buys and they'll have 3 games in like 13 days.
Yeah.
Which the Eagles, by the way, are doing today. Today's against San Francisco. Your third one.
Gosh, yeah.
Brutal there. You're 3rd and 13, and then you have like 1 in 20 because you have your bye week. Not a great time.
Well, the Eagles get the 49ers off a mini bye because they played on Thanksgiving, and then they're going to get the Cowboys on Sunday off their mini bye.
Right.
So the Eagles, look, the Eagles have done pretty well regardless of circumstances, although that game today, it was odd to see San Francisco a 3-point favorite on the road against a 10-1 team.
Yeah, and maybe we'll circle back to that before the end of our conversation. But speaking of the line, it's down to 8.5 last time I checked this morning for Miami today over Washington. Are you surprised it's that low considering Washington's last outing and how potent Miami is offensively?
Yeah, I still see some 9s. I even see some 9.5s. But I don't know, Craig. I mean, I certainly don't think that sharp money's coming in on Washington perhaps because Ron Rivera is taking over the defense. I think it's outdoors. It's, maybe a slightly wet turf. The truth is Miami hasn't been super explosive in recent weeks. Look at that Raiders game. It was an ugly game for them a few weeks ago. I mean, would you have ever thought that Aiden O'Connell, a rookie quarterback, could throw 3 interceptions in a game against the Dolphins, and it's 17-13 in the fourth quarter, or 20-13 in the fourth quarter, and that's where the score ended. So, some things, this may be more about Miami. I don't know, but I have no idea what's going to happen. I could see Washington being competitive, and I could see this being 45-10, a 45-10 repeat. I have no idea what to expect today.
I mean, isn't that the nature of the team this year, though, right? They've just been so inconsistent, playing up to Philly, playing down to whoever they're playing. So, I mean, if you had to put money on the team you were expecting to see today, like, what would it be? Like, for them to be the team that played Philly, like, what do you need to see from them today?
I mean, don't ask me. I told you on Thanksgiving that I actually liked Washington. I played Washington. I thought that they would have a competitive chance. And the truth is, through about 3 quarters, they actually were, in it. It got sideways in the fourth quarter. I don't think the final score reflected the actual game itself, but they didn't have a chance to win it. I'm not suggesting that they did, but I don't know. I mean, I think we see a team that week in and week out, certainly over the last 5 weeks, I think, since the first Giant game, that gives you a chance offensively. But they played the best defense that they've played all season on Thanksgiving. They're playing another good defense today, a defense that's playing well here recently today. I'd like to just continue to focus on this last 5 games is about Sam Howell, the development of Sam Howell, Eric Bieniemy to a certain extent as well. I don't know how much you guys have talked about this on your podcast, but I'd actually, at this point in the season, Logan, I'd like to see maybe a little bit more marrying some run and pass, just to see what Sam would be like with a chance in the running game with play action and bootleg, because we haven't really seen that part of what Sam could be this year. So I don't know. I would expect the offense to be capable of moving the football, churning out yards, first downs, but they've got to finish, unlike on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, Kevin, is the Commanders are actually 6th in the league in yards per attempt. Like the idea that they don't run the ball well is not necessarily supported by the numbers, which is funny because, Logan, when we sit down and watch the tape, you look at the run game, you're like, this isn't the best design run game I've ever seen. Like, there's a lot of bad stuff happening. But they ultimately are averaging 4.6 a carry, which is good for, I believe, last time I checked, 6th in the entire NFL.
But they're dead last in attempts, right? Or close to dead last in attempts. Yeah.
I think for that, it's more like they just are subverting expectation a little bit, right? Everybody's expecting them to throw the ball all the time, which they do. So when you run the ball, it's a nice complementary piece.
Right, but like what would happen, to Kevin's point, if they got more merit? Who could know?
Well, we never got a chance to see what, the old adage is with a young quarterback, right? And that is, the best friend to a young, inexperienced quarterback is a good defense and a running game. He didn't have a good defense and he didn't have a running game. And to me, like Sam with a running game, like I see a guy play action, bootleg, like, in some of if those two things were married together, I think we'd see another side of Sam that would be really promising too.
Yeah, Kevin Sheehan's with us here on the Team 980, 106.7 The Fan. Take Command pregame show. I mean, Kevin, you watch a ton of college football. You see what Penix does this weekend. You see what Bo Nix does in that same game this weekend. You see all these top guys all year long with the college football regular season now done, and the Commanders staring at a potential top 5 pick. Where are you with Sam right now in terms of the level of prospect that would need to be available for Washington to move on from him compared to keeping him as the future starter, understanding that there are still 5 more games to evaluate this?
I guess the easiest way to put it, Craig, is that right now there's no way I would preclude taking a quarterback in the top 5 if I were Washington. There's just no way. I mean, I've watched Jaden Daniels pretty much every week. It would be really difficult if he were sitting there at 5 or 6 based on the first 12 games of Sam this year for me to pass on that. It wouldn't mean necessarily that I was passing on Sam either. I want the options for this franchise when they get to April. But, there's a difference between potentially special and what we've seen from Sam through the first 12 games, which is potentially a starting NFL quarterback. So there's nothing I've seen that would preclude me from, taking the quarterbacks and saying, nope, we don't need to look at them. We're good. We're gonna draft a left tackle, or we're gonna draft Brock Bowers, or we're gonna take somebody else. Not in this draft with the quarterbacks that potentially they'd have access to based on where they finish.
Yeah, I think that's something. I'm really glad you brought that up because this team should do like a comprehensive evaluation of everybody in the draft. And if you think one of those guys is special, one of those quarterbacks, like as good as Sam has played, if you think he's the next Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck or whatever, you got to make that decision. You got to make that move. So I think that's something that people just it's like they can't hold the duality of that in their brains for some reason.
It totally makes sense. By the same token, you look at the young quarterbacks drafted the last couple of years, and I'd have a hard time saying Sam's any worse than 4th for sure, and I'd probably put him 3rd behind Purdy and C.J. Stroud. So obviously we'll see what Richardson is when he's healthy. Bryce Young's in a nightmare situation, but it's not like Sam's been bad either. So it's hard. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, at least he's making it, a tough call because he has shown a lot more good than not good. There's a lot there that's promising. But, Andy Reid, in 2017 had an Alex Smith that was playing pretty well, said, yeah, we can do better, and traded up to do better. So I think in this league, you've always got to be thinking about it. In that particular 2018 draft, the 2018 draft, the year that they traded for Alex Smith, so it would have been post-2017, Jays said, and I think Kyle Smith has kind of indicated, they didn't even look at quarterbacks in that draft. And I think that was probably a mistake. You should always be looking at quarterbacks unless you already have Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Hurts, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, though, to just acknowledge with Sam, though, is that he is on a young deal.
Yeah.
He is developing. I think Jalen Hurts is like the most recent precedent for a guy who didn't look, like he looked a little in between. I think the team mortgaged draft capital for the next couple of years and were able to kind of put themselves in the best of both worlds. So there is an opportunity there as well. But I do think they should be evaluating Quarterbacks.
Yeah, you always evaluate everyone.
Evaluate them.
And keep in mind, Logan, they evaluated Jalen Hurts and drafted him in the second round shortly after they had given Carson Wentz a big bag.
Absolutely. Quarterback's the most important position in football.
That's what the good organizations do. They never stop, looking.
No doubt. All right, Kevin, who you like around the league today and who you like in this one?
Oh, God. I was just having
Did you just not like yourself at this point of the year? That's basically what you just said. That's what that was to me.
They are all terrible teams. Like, nobody's betting the Falcons, so of course I like the Jets. Nobody's betting the Panthers, so of course I like them. I'm sorry, everybody's betting the Falcons, I like the Jets. Everybody's betting the Buccaneers, so I like the Panthers. Let me give you a team other than the bad teams that I'm going to be wagering on today, like the Patriots, Panthers, and Jets, and maybe even Cardinals. I do like the Packers tonight. I like the Packers at home at Lambeau against the Chiefs. I like them to cover the 6. I think they're going to have a chance to win the game. They have played very well in the last 2 games for Jordan Love, albeit against bad defenses, or at least teams playing poor defensively, the Chargers and the Lions. He's looked the part. I think he can really throw it. I think tonight's game is a really interesting game, not only in the NFC playoff race because the Packers could get to 6-6, but I'm rooting for the Chiefs to have to play a road playoff game for the first time this year. So this would go a long way towards that.
All right. Well, we'll see. Every time I try, I think I'm good on Jordan Love and believe in him. He lets me down, but maybe tonight will be the night against what's been a very good Chiefs defense this year. No matter what happens, Kevin will be talking about it tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the Team 980. Don't miss the Kevin Sheen Show podcast as well. Kevin, thank you, sir. Enjoy the bye week, and we'll talk to you back here in 2 weeks.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin Sheen with us on the Take Command pregame show. When we get back, a little bit of coach speak. Eric Bieniemy actually talked about that running game a little bit this week, and maybe gave a bit of a hint as to why he hasn't been so fond of it. We'll discuss next on the Take Command pregame show.
Route on a guy and, put your hands on somebody and kind of know what they like to do to shed and kind of get a feel for it. And so as you get to know them better and they get to know you, you kind of start playing that advanced chess metric. And I think the familiarity breeds a faster game quality. Because I know exactly what this defense is. I know exactly how they're going to play this run. We ran it against them, 6 weeks ago. Let's see it again. And we ran it against them last year twice. You know what I'm saying? So you get a really good feel for that. And obviously, the fans in the stadium are just a little bit more up. And so I definitely think the divisional thing is real. And you talk about it differently. You talk about divisional games in the week in a different way. So it's definitely something that's 100% real. And in the context of the Giants, for whatever reason, they just have a good feel for this team. They have a good feel, good opportunity. In our Take Fives, we talked about some Giant stories. I felt like during early in my playing career, I had a really good feel for what the Giants were doing. I don't know what it was. When I went in that game, I just felt like I knew them really well. And sometimes when the Giants play the Commanders, it's they just have a good knack and feel for kind of the holes and the wrinkles in the defense and ways to scheme stuff open. So I think divisional games are so fun. They're so fun to watch. They're so fun to play in. And I think they're fun to talk about because, like you said, even in this game where, we're going to talk about the Giants here in a second, Giants aren't a very good football team at the moment. I don't know. And Santana Moss is this is one of my favorite things he does. He's very consistent with his points of analysis. And anytime we're playing a divisional game, he's you can't count the other team out. And I think that's 100% accurate. And so whatever the record is, however bad the Giants have played, this team, the Commanders, need to come and put their best foot forward and just say we are the better football team, we're the better roster, and play like it. And I think ultimately that's what this game comes down to.
You'll hear from the Sports Junkies at the top of the hour on the Take Command pregame show. We're live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. So, Eric Bieniemy, as we get to our Coach Speak segment, Logan, was speaking earlier this week and was asked once again about the run-pass splits. And we were just talking about with Kevin, right? Like, this is a team that has actually run the ball effectively. They've averaged about 4.6 yards a carry. That's good for 6th in the NFL. But they are dead last in attempts per game. It's funny, you look at like the overall attempts rankings, and you rank it by attempts, and they're, I think, third from the top, which is third from the bottom. But then you go to the games played column, and everyone's played 11 games until you get to about midway through the pack, except for the Commanders, who have played 12. So it is clearly something that they have not done at a near historical rate.
Do you remember the other teams that were on there? In terms of
ironically, the Jets are another team that's in the bottom 3. I can't remember who was the one that's worse.
I would be curious to see if they just because their play volume is so low.
That's exactly what it is. Because Anthony and I were looking at it on our show. We were on the show this week, and I went to pass attempts, and the Jets are also bottom 10 in those, where the Commanders have passed the ball more than anyone else in the league. So, long story short, you wonder, like, young quarterback, it's actually been pretty good for you statistically. Why aren't you doing it more? And part of the reason that he kind of let out was like, we can't finish. We fumble the ball, and we can't finish on these drives. And I just wonder if Bieniemy, from a trust factor in his running backs, but also in like a trust factor in his offense to eventually convert in the red zone, feels like he needs to push the ball a little bit more, try to generate some of these big plays. And I'm curious, when you watch the tape, in terms of seeing some of those shot plays that necessarily haven't been converted, because like we've been talking about how they haven't been there, but it doesn't mean they haven't been called.
Yeah.
Like, what are you seeing from a play calling standpoint that maybe suggests that frustration is backed up in more than just having to answer a question at a press conference?
That's really interesting. I mean, what's the fumble rate for the group in terms of touches? Like that would be something.
Certainly the last couple of weeks it's not been good. It feels like every time they've gotten going, Rodriguez fumble, Robinson
but that
fumble.
was in the Giants game, right? I mean, they didn't fumble against the Cowboys. They didn't fumble against Seattle, right?
I feel like there was against Seattle.
We should double check, or we can double check that. But I don't know. It seems like a very interesting answer. I don't know if I agree with that in terms of his perception. I don't know if I align with that totally. But I mean, I think. If there had been a change due to an increase in fumbling, I think we would have seen more carries earlier in the season. I think this is just who he is offensively. I think analytically it makes sense. I think EPA per play it makes sense. You want to throw the ball more. Like that's 100% why. And I think Sam's done a good job. The offense has been effective. It's been very productive. So I think there's, if I'm him, I would just say that. I would just say this is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. And it seems weird, very out of character for him to kind of call out his players like that. But they got to hold on to the football. I'm with that 100%. So.
You're right on Seattle, by the way.
Yeah. So that just seems like a weird – you had one game where they fumbled a little bit.
Well, also, I mean, against the Giants, I feel like they were more balanced.
They were more balanced,
And so maybe it's like, hey, like I tried to run it more, and the guys couldn't hold on to the football. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like that. Maybe that's the former player in me. I don't love that answer. Like, I don't want to talk about that.
We've hit a former player nerve with Logan.
Yeah.
I mean, he is right, though, in that they have to finish. And
they do have to finish.
That's been a thing all year.
They do have to finish.
Run, pass, whatever.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with you running the football, in my opinion, right? Like, yes, you want to finish drives 100%, and some people would argue that it's more effective to finish drives by running the football in the low red because the windows are thrown with a rookie quarterback. I'm sure there's an argument that can be formulated and developed in any way you want to do it here, but I don't. It's just weird that that's what he would say. It seems like he's like kind of copping out of it a little bit, which is, like having spoken with him seems a little out of character. Excuse me. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the direct quote. But and of course now the transcript doesn't want to transcribe.
That's right.
But I do think that, like, when we obviously talked about this a lot and trying to find ways to maximize this offense. And, Miami's defense is an interesting one because they are stout up front, not quite as stout as they have been. Jalen Phillips, of course,
it's a bummer, man.
really, really, within a football context, tragic injury.
Yeah.
A guy whose story, I mean, Hard Knocks is chronicling Miami in season, and the first 2 episodes are out now. And last week they really poured it on thick with Phillips of building him up, and then ultimately, obviously, the the game happens and he tears the Achilles. And, they tell the story of how this guy was hit by a car when he was at UCLA and then medically retired and then came back, was great at University of Miami, had some injuries early in his NFL career, and then was turning the corner to the point that Mike McDaniels tells him before that game against the Jets, like, hey, man, this is going to be your coming out party. Has probably the best game of his career until his Achilles goes. But they still have Bradley Chubb. They still have Christian Wilkins. They're really good, but their back end is what's terrifying. With Ramsey back there and Howard, and we'll see if Javon Holland plays today, listed as questionable. But they've got playmakers that I think I'd be a little hesitant if I'm Bieniemy to put the ball up a ton today and let those guys make plays on it. So I would personally be looking to run the ball a little bit more today between weather, defensive scheme, balance, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about that every single week. How just sprinkling in probably 5 to 7 more runs in the game would probably be super effective. However, that's not what he's done. He's done it one game this year, and it was the Giants. And obviously that game, like you alluded to, didn't go the way that I think we all wanted and thought it should go. So maybe he's just going to be like, this is who we are. This is who we are offensively. And we're going to have a very efficient running game. We're not going to rely on it in terms of volume. But I do agree with you. I think the Miami Dolphins in terms of secondary is scary because what Vic Fangio wants to do is he wants to play coverage. He's basically daring you to run the football. He's the inventor of this man match, or maybe not the inventor, but the guy that's proliferated it around the NFL. They're going to be in superior numbers in coverage 90% of the time. So what I would say is that means they're playing light boxes. So can you take advantage of those light boxes? Kind of to your point, I think is what you're getting at. And I think that's 100% the right idea. He's daring you to run the ball. So run the ball until he changes his coverage structure. Because they do stuff numerically in the back end at such a high level, it's really hard to identify coverages because all their coverages can look the same because there's no run player. It's all, hey, it's split safety. We're going to rotate to 6. We're going to rotate to true 4. We're going to rotate to 2. We're going to rotate down to single high. We're going to play man out of this, man match with a plug. But it all looks the same, and that makes me extremely nervous for Sam because the Cowboys do a good job of disguising. Miami does it better. And they've got guys in the back end that do the disguise thing really well, but also pick the football off at a high level and make plays in the context of that defense. Now, they are still working through some of the man match principles because they've got some new people in there and they do bust stuff. They're not a perfect group, but they're very, very talented, and the scheme is very, very good, and it's being called and directed by the guy that, again, is the godfather of this defensive philosophy. So.
Yeah. By the way, to go full circle, I found the quote.
Oh, there we go.
I couldn't find the word fumble because he used the phrase turning the football over versus fumble directly. But the quote from Bieniemy reads in part, he's asked about running the ball more recently on first and second down. He says, we still got to make sure that we're putting our guys in a situation where they can be more efficient and understand exactly how we're going to handle certain things. But when it's all said and done with, we got to go out and play. We have to execute better. I'm going to keep saying this. We have to finish. We have to sustain drives, and we have to finish. What I mean by finishing, you got to eliminate the penalties. You can't turn the ball over. And when you're doing those things, you can't beat Jones Junior High School. So those are little things that become a focus issue that we need to make sure we're clearing up.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's talking specifically about running the ball there. I think he's just talking about general offensive production is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the question was about running the football, and that's obviously the quote in part.
But EB's the master of look over here, what's this? But I think he's talking more general offensive football, which makes a little bit more sense to me. Because, again, when you are not an elite group, right, and there are very few elite groups in the NFL now, if you have penalties, if you turn the football over, if you're not great on third down, you're not a good offense, and you're not going to finish drives. And so I think that's what he's alluding to is maybe that attention to detail required, from the quarterback, from the running back, from the offensive line to get that level of execution required that we talked about at the top of the show. We said in the red zone, it's very hard. Windows are smaller, blitzes are different, coverage schemes are different. Get that level of execution required to be successful there. I think that's 100% valid. Very coach-speaky for sure, but I think that's exactly what we're looking for.
Yes. I just think it's interesting that that's where his mind went when asked specifically about the run game, but, that is what it is. What do the Junkies think of this game? I'm going to guess the optimism in that room was not very high.
Yeah, putting a lot of money on that.
All week long. But let's find out. You'll hear from the Sports Junkies next where we get into the tail of the tape at 11:15. We'll go around the NFL at 11:30. It's the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Greg Hoffman, Logan Paulsen. Logan, if you're watching on the YouTube stream, look, it's Logan Paulsen. He'll be back in a moment. Don't really need Logan to tell you that the Sports Junkies have thoughts on this game, and they're going to share them with you in about 30 seconds. Coming up after that, don't forget, we got Tail of the Tape. We'll go around the NFL at 11:30. Get your fantasy lineup set. Who's in, who is out. Grant Paulson will join us from FedEx Field later as well. But right now, here are the Sports Junkies with their thoughts on today's Commanders-Dolphins tilt.
All right, boys, another week.
All right, you're up.
It's preview, and another week coming off an embarrassing loss. This one led to Jack Del Rio's firing. Do we expect anything different from this Commanders defense against an explosive Dolphins offense?
It's going to be interesting to see what kind of different looks Ron throws at Tua and Mike McDaniel and that offensive staff that Del Rio would have thrown at him. But here's the bottom line is, this is probably the most explosive offense in the league, and they're balanced, and they've got the best receiver. They've got a legit running game. You can't key on one guy or one facet of their offense. So, man, the defense is going to have to play the game of their life to kind of win this game. Force turnovers, that would be huge. But Miami is just so good at passing and at running the ball, you can't really key on anything.
We have 12 games of evidence telling us that this Commanders defense is known for allowing a lot of chunk explosive plays. And now with Tyreek Hill averaging 15 yards per reception, Jalen Waddle at 13.3. Those guys are just big plays waiting to happen. I think that they erupt against this defense. You can't fix what's wrong with this defense in a week. Ron is on his way out. Everybody knows it. This Miami team is superior to the Commanders team in every major aspect of the operation. Coach, offense, defense, explosive playmakers. Miami's just better all the way around.
On paper they are, and you can't argue with what Cake said. But that's not how games play out, man. I mean, how many games I've been to where the underdog, wins or puts on they're hanging in there for 2 quarters, and all of a sudden you got a game in every sport at every level. It's going to take some luck. It's going to take some good fortune. But who's to say that we can't catch Tua and a tipped ball interception or, as we talked about on the show, maybe a Jamison Crowder punt return or something to go their way where all of a sudden it doesn't play out exactly the way you think.
I brought this up on the Junkies. If you look at the Dolphins last month, they've had a couple games where they didn't score 30 points, didn't score 40 points. The game against the Raiders was a pretty close game. They scored just 20 points. I don't expect that because, as Cakes points out, the weakness of the Commanders' defense is giving up these big plays, lack of communication, and they're facing an offense that probably runs more motion than anybody, that has more explosive players. So that's not a good recipe. However, I will say, I think the Commanders can score. In that Cowboys game on Thanksgiving, they should have scored more points. They were moving the ball a lot.
Right, and it was close going into the fourth quarter before it kind of fell apart. There could be a kind of a new coach bounce bit that you have with Ron overseeing the defense. Maybe they do a couple different things than what Jack was normally doing. I mean, who knows? Look, it's going to take luck. It's going to take good fortune. But I think they can play a competitive game.
I am interested to see how Sam Howell fares these last 5 games of the season. Going to play some better defenses. I'm not saying the Dolphins are the best defense, but they have Jalen Ramsey.
Yes.
So
ball hawk.
And we do know that this season, Sam Howell has 3 pick-sixes. So we'll see how he fares. I'll get in first. I just don't think that they're going to be able to hang. I think the offense may have some success, moderate success against the Dolphins, but I think the Dolphins are going to put up a boatload of points. I've got them winning 42-20.
I think the Dolphins win fairly easily, 31-20. It'll be interesting to see how Tua plays away from home because he's clearly a different quarterback away from Miami. He played a pretty bad. Tyreek Hill, who's going to have another big game.
I think you're going to see throwbacks to when enemy fan bases invaded the stadium. You're going to see some of that this weekend. I think there's going to be basically a home field advantage for Miami. Look and see how many people were wearing blue at MetLife last weekend when the Dolphins were on the road in New York. I think you're going to see the same thing here. I think the Dolphins are going to have a lot of fans in the building, and I think they take care of the Commanders relatively easily. I have the Dolphins winning and covering by a half point, 31-21.
Got about 30 seconds.
This week that Tua on the road isn't quite as prolific as he is at home.
It's true.
I think it's like an 8-to-6 touchdown interception ratio. I don't know. I think the Commanders could put up a fight. I certainly don't have the courage to pick them to win, but I'll take the Commanders in a relatively close game, 27-17.
You mean you'll take the Dolphins?
I'll take the Dolphins in a relatively close game, 27-17.
All right, that's how we see it in this Commanders matchup against the Dolphins. Back to you, boys.
All right, thank you very much, JP and company. All right, Logan. So, it's funny because we were listening to those guys, and it's like, the talking points for everyone are the same over the next couple of weeks. And I guess the quick question I would have before we get to tail the tape next is, how much can some of these things change? Like, how much of this stuff is written in stone, right? Versus, and I think the biggest one is Sam, right?
Yeah.
I think Rivera's fate is probably sealed, unfortunately for him, in a way that is not great. Bieniemy's fate is, there's nothing. I mean, obviously there's stuff he can do, but it's going to depend on who the next head coach is.
Right.
If Ben Johnson or one of these other offensive minds gets hired, they're probably not keeping Eric Bieniemy. If it's a defensive coach, then I think Eric's chances of staying are significantly higher.
Sure.
But for Sam, how much can he really change the narrative, the evaluation, not even the narrative, the evaluation over the next 5 weeks?
Well, I think the one things that everyone's talking about is I want to watch Sam. And you're looking for a certain level of consistency.
Yeah.
When you're there, when you're the guy, when you're Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, name your guy. Josh Allen not very consistent, but you get my point. Those guys that are top tier guys are super, super consistent, and they establish themselves as saying I might not be playing my best game, but I'm definitely not playing a bad game. And so if he kind of falls into that rhythm where he's playing really good football the last couple of weeks, I think that question of the only remaining question is, you've seen the high stuff. You've seen him do it at a high level, but you've also seen tremendously low stuff. Is, can you find a certain level of consistency from him? And if they do, I think they'll probably win some more games than they'll lose. But that's what I'm looking for. And that's ultimately what the second people say, stop talking about Sam, because they know what he's going to bring, is the time where I think you have your answer, if that makes sense. Sam is this. I don't care what Sam does anymore, because he's going to do this all the time. All the question about whether – you were talking about Jordan Love, right? There's still a question because he's new, and all new players, there's a question about how good is he going to be. He was really good the last 2 weeks, but the week before that he was terrible. Even Trevor Lawrence to a certain extent. Sometimes you see this flash of, top 2 quarterback in the NFL, and you see him kind of fall back into that, 8, 9, 10 range. And it's where is that consistency at? And so young quarterbacks, that's an issue, and that's a question. But for me, the one thing that is totally malleable and changeable is if Sam comes out and plays high-level, consistent football for the last 5 games, I think he emphatically stamps it and says, like we talked about with Kevin, do your quarterback evaluation. Of course. Here is my resume, and you probably don't need to draft a quarterback because I'm the guy.
It's going to be hard to beat that, and what you'd expect to get next year and possibly even for years to come. All right, when we get back, so one of the ways you become consistent is you get the ball to your best players. Terry McLaurin's targets are fairly high these last couple of weeks. His catches and his production, not so much. Where's the disconnect? We'll dive into that and a little bit more on the offense next in the tail of the tape before we go around the NFL at 11:30 here on the Take Command pregame show.
We have a new submission to the Real Things Hall of Fame. The F-35 is a fighter jet that the military has. It is very expensive. Very expensive. The F-35 program costs the U.S. government / the military over $1 trillion. This is one of the most expensive things in the U.S. government's budget is the program that makes these planes. Each one is incredibly valuable and expensive. And something happened during a training mission, but this jet leaves, they go on a training mission, and it's in stealth mode, apparently, and the pilot has to eject. So the pilot's like, I'm up out of here. Pilot lands relatively safely, has, I think, an injury or two that has to be tended to, but, like, is alive. But then they lost the jet. So the jet disappeared from the radar. The U.S. government's like, well, we don't know where the jet is. And so the Buford, which is the suburb not suburb, it's in South Carolina. It's by Charleston. Close enough. If people are actually from there and don't want to say that and want to say it's by Hilton Head, I know I grew up in the state. Leave my geography alone for the sake of the story, which I've now made less efficient by telling you all of those things because I can't help myself. Talk about a plane crash. Hey, we're back. So the F-35 gets essentially lost, and they're like, I don't know where this very expensive warplane went. And lo and behold, sometime the next day or later that day, it crashes somewhere, and luckily no one's hurt. But this $100 million plane is gone. Whoopsies. We crashed the plane. And this is an eyewitness account from a Charleston area television station of someone who heard the crash.
In the bathroom taking a shave, and I heard a screeching, between a screech and a whistle. I said, what in the world is this? And I heard a boom. Then my whole house shook.
White says he didn't realize it was a plane at the time, so he didn't call anybody.
The first thought came to me, I said, what's a meteorite coming out of space or something? And I said, well, if the airplane, it needed to be reported, but the thing was flying just too low.
The F-35B airplane wreckage created an extensive debris field.
That voice, we gotta get a drop for the voice because it might be better than Steph Curry's.
I was gonna say, I feel like we have to do a comparison. Can I pull this off with? Yeah, okay. So I had to compare or see if I had enough channels on the board to do this. But we got Steph Curry here. We got Charlie Brown here. And we got our mans here.
His is better, though.
I think his is the best one. His is definitely, it's not quite Charlie Brown. It's definitely close to Steph Curry, though.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. We will go around the NFL coming up in, 15 minutes, 12 minutes at this point.
Wow.
At 11:30. I was about to say half an hour, but Logan, we're already one segment in, hour two. We got folks flowing in here at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Just going to keep on filling up as we head towards 1 p.m. and the kickoff of all the games, including Commanders and Dolphins. So 11:15 time for Tale of the Tape. We want to focus on Terry McLaurin for this Tale of the Tape. He has actually had pretty decent target numbers as of late. However, he has not had a lot of catches as of late, Logan. Where is the disconnect on a broad level, before we dive into a specific level, of, okay, yeah, he's getting the ball thrown in his general direction, but not catching it, not producing in the way that we know Terry's capable of?
Yeah, and I think this is like it's a really complicated question, one we could probably spend a lot of time on. And so what I'd say, just to start off, is I do think that Terry, at his core, you got to kind of know what the player is. And he's a guy who is a solid route runner, not a great route runner. He's not overly big. He's not overly fast, while being fast and physical to catch point, all those things. So that leads to him kind of being more of a contested catch style of player. And so there's not going to be a ton of separation. And when there's not a ton of separation, the windows are a little bit tighter. But he's been successful at points of his career doing that. And so
1,000-yard receiver every year of his career, et cetera.
That's fine. But I also think there's been a little bit of miscommunication issues, like between Sam and Terry, in terms of how to maximize some of those targets that he's traditionally been very good at. So what I mean by that is, like in the Dallas game, for example.
By the way, where he had 11 targets and just 4 catches.
Right. So he's getting pressed on the outside. And he's getting pressed. He's running a hitch, and it converts to a go versus certain coverage. And it looks to me like they're running some type of what I would call a thunder. So, like, if you are basically it's like a 3-route conversion. One's a 5-yard hitch, one's an 8-yard kind of box fade back shoulder, and then there's a go if you beat the guy, right? And there's different pre-snap reads you have to kind of get that done. And so he's running the route. He takes off. It looks like he's going to snap it down, and Sam throws the ball deep. So obviously miscommunication there, right? Mm-hmm. That's one. There's other stuff where he runs the go and Sam throws the back shoulder, or Sam puts him too far outside. And one of the problems of being your X receiver is you are going to get a lot of these kind of contested catch, lower percentage throwing opportunities, right? Like running a go is not, I don't love that as an offensive coordinator. I don't just love like run a go, because you have to be exceptional with the throw. You have to be exceptional with the receiver. So I do think they're still, Sam and him are seemingly still working through some of that chemistry, which is leading to, A, it's a difficult throw, B, there's adjustments by both players that they're not always synced up, and C, like the lack of general separation from Terry can make that a little bit difficult on the quarterback. So I think it's kind of a combination of all those things, and I think schematically we need to acknowledge that he is put in these situations where it's difficult. Like, you're asking him to win, but kind of by job description as the X receiver, that's what you should do, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. So, like, what's the difference between, for instance, to go back to that Dallas game, it said he has got, 12 targets, 11 targets. Curtis has basically the same number. He's got 9 catches. Some of that is, alignment. Some of that is skill set, chemistry. Like, what is it that he and Curtis and Sam are on the same page, where Terry, these are much more difficult attempts?
Well, I think, the opportunities that Curtis got, he's got 2 screens in there, 2 tunnel screens. Those are a really high percentage. He's got kind of what I would call like a big out, where he's, gets to inside stem. He's kind of isolated, working his own show there. Ends up being a big completion for him. And you see a little bit of route running nuance and explosion out of the break that, again, Terry's a good route runner, but he lacks that kind of elite twitch that Curtis has in those situations, so able to get a completion there. There's a scramble play, where 2 of those where Curtis gets the like, it's not like totally game planned up for Curtis. It's a little bit serendipity. So I do think that's another thing is, like, when you play in the slot, I think you get better matchups and you get better opportunities. You get routes coming in closer proximity to the quarterback, which is very, very helpful. So there's a lot of things that his usage pattern in that game allowed for that meant more production. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. As opposed to Terry, who's going to be your X receiver. And so
John Stephon Gilmore, all-pro level corner, as opposed to the slot guy.
Correct, yeah. And I think even with Curtis, he's going to draw the other corner, even when it's not the slot guy, even when he's playing Z and he's playing outside, he's going to draw still a pretty favorable matchup. So I think there's an element of that too with the game plan and the receiver specifically. So, and I do think like there are opportunities to kind of to maximize Terry maybe in a different way through game plan and find some of those opportunities like we saw in the preseason with him. But that can be challenging in the flow of a game too.
How much are the struggles of Jahan Dotson and Terry related on some of these things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It's something that we should probably take a deeper dive on, maybe on the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, we do have a bye-week podcast that we need to do this week, so perhaps that could be a study case that we do.
Because when I look at it, I kind of say to myself, are you – when you watch Miami's offense, right? There is so much time and energy, and when you watch San Fran's offense, so much time and energy into making sure you maximize touches, you maximize the space for the receiver. You're using play action or using route distribution to attack defenses in a very specific way, and that's where the ball should go. And so you can kind of formation, and get your best receivers in those spots, and it breeds a sense of confidence that knowing this is my opportunity, the ball should be coming to me. If I run a good route and we get the look, I'm going to get the football. Here, I do think that there is an element of like this straight drop back where we're just reading concepts out, where you don't know who's getting the ball all the time. You don't know whose opportunity it is, and that can be challenging for receivers, especially ones who are used to a certain like a high target volume.
Yeah,
it can be very, very challenging for them. Like for me it was easy because I knew that I'm not getting the ball that often, so I'm going to run every route as hard as I can because that's like my job description.
Right.
For guys that are used to high target share, they're not used to running routes and not getting the ball. And so I think that is something that you have to learn as a skill to say, hey, I'm going to run this route, understanding that Sam's going to read it out and I could get the football. And when you watch Pringle in the game, for example, he's been in this offense before. I think he understands that. He understands like his role in needing to run every route as hard as possible because that opens stuff up. And understanding,
right.
And I think there's also an understanding of the why of the concept in a way that those other guys don't have. Because he knows that, hey, like on this, when I'm the angle, this feels like a clear out, but if that safety bites the corner, I'm going to be wide open for a big play. And the other guys might not see it that way yet because they're not familiar with the offense in the same way that he is.
They haven't experienced it.
100%.
They've run that angle and not seen that happen. Pringle has. And
Terry's mentioned that. Terry's mentioned there are times where you watch Kansas City film and you see them hitting concepts because Patrick Mahomes understands, right? And
right.
Here, Sam doesn't have that same level of understanding yet because he's still learning and growing in the offense. So some of those opportunities, which are big plays, don't show up quite the same way.
For sure. So within the context of this offense, understanding that they're not going to all of a sudden like, actually, we should run Miami's offense. That's not how this works. One, do they need to try to get Terry and Jahan more touches and be a little bit more efficient with those targets to be more successful? And if so, how would they do that?
Right. So I think one of the things that sticks out to me is like we've found like what Terry does well, and he runs slants really well. He runs hitches very well. And I like that EB has leaned into running more slants with Terry, especially in critical moments, getting him touches that way. But I also think that, again, when you watch Houston, when you watch these offenses, like, are there ways where we can get him in a bunch, get him a better release, kind of make some noise in terms of him having – because I think much like with the defensive line, if I just said, hey, go beat the offensive tackle, you should win probably – I don't know, if you're good, probably 4 out of 10 times consistently, right? And if you're really good, maybe 6. But it's hard. It's hard to consistently do that, right? And I'm talking in a true one-on-one situation, right? This is not in the context of a game. But it's the same thing for a receiver. If I just say go win this route, that's while that is part of his job description, I'm not maximizing him as a coach.
Right. So I'm making his job as easy as I could.
So like we talked about motioning, we talked about formations, and there are times where you see him get touches like that. I'm trying to think the first game of the year, they kind of long motion. Terry's in the slot to the left. He motions it to the right. Logan Thomas runs a dig, and Terry runs an angle across the field, and they drop him because they both match the tight end. Because of the release he takes. They ran that same play a couple weeks ago for an explosive play to Terry. That's a way to maximize the touch for him, right? Saying, hey, we think they're going to play like this. Let's make sure the coverage dictates and run the routes and the patterning to manipulate the coverage so Terry gets this good opportunity. And I think I would like to see more of that as opposed to just calling like basic concept and having Sam read it out. Let's find ways to get him meaningful touches in the context of your offense, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, that is our tale of the tape. If you want more tape breakdown, make sure that you join us for the Take Command podcast. We're out 3 times weekly. Our tape breakdown comes out on Wednesdays, so we'll take a look at this game on Tuesday and then have it ready and packaged up for you by Wednesday morning. Subscribe to the Take Command podcast wherever you get your pods. When we get back, we will go around the NFL. Great slate of games, including one that is highest on the marquee. We will break it all down next on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan. It's the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. The Team 980, 106.7 The Fan. We're live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen, and it is time for us, Logan, to go around the NFL. We'll also get you the inactives here in just a moment for some of these key games and, of course, for Washington and Miami. But we will start with just kind of a broader look on the games in general. Colts and Titans.
Dude, Titans 6-5 though.
Colts 6-5. Titans 4-7. This game actually really matters for the top of the AFC South. Obviously, it also matters for the AFC wildcard spot, as the Colts currently are in the playoffs, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly from looking this week. Can Gardner Minshew and company go on the road to Tennessee and get this thing done?
And I will say Tennessee, their home road splits this year are absolutely insane. Like at home, they're undefeated or something like that, and they win by 10 points. And on the road, they're terrible. So it'll be interesting to see if that holds up against a pretty good Colts team that I think is playing better than expectations.
They just can't catch a break though, because like every time they start to get rolling, something else happens. Jonathan Taylor now likely out for the rest of the year, but Zach Moss
played well.
Pretty darn good backup.
Yeah.
So we'll see on that one.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a fun game to watch. I think I always like watching the Titans. You know me. I think Derrick Henry's playing.
Which is funny because you're the only person that enjoys watching the Titans.
I know, but I
don't think Titans fans enjoy watching the Titans. In fact, I specifically think Titans fans don't enjoy watching the Titans.
There's a Titans fan in the office, and he hates watching the Titans. I just think so. Right now, it's not fun to watch them because of all of the kind of nonsense associated with the team. Their offensive line's bad, but Derrick Henry's playing some of the best football the last couple of weeks. I know statistically it hasn't been that way, but forced missed tackles, yards after contact, all there. And then, anytime you got a young quarterback who's got the talent of Will Levis, you got to check him out. So I think that's what I find compelling about that. But I do think the Colts probably win that football game.
Chargers and Patriots. I don't know. We need to spend a ton of time on this one.
Why not? I'm just kidding.
Bailey Zappi starting.
Yeah.
Malik Cunningham has been activated, so we could see another quarterback change.
How many screens do you think they run, the Patriots?
The limit does not exist. How many offensive plays are they going to run?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think they're going to run the ball about 40 times and throw 15 screens and 5 dropbacks.
And lose 28-0?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Chargers, so it'll be a one-score game.
That's also true. Chargers just 4-7 on the year. Certainly seems like
and
Brandon Staley's.
Is Allen hurt in this game? Is Allen playing? Do you know?
I think he wound up being okay, but let me double check.
He's got like a hamstring or a quad injury, yeah. So, I mean, obviously he is their offense at this point. So if he doesn't play, like, what do they do? Would be my question.
Yeah, he was listed as questionable. Tell you what, we'll when we get the inactive list in a moment from around the league, I'll follow up on that.
Yes.
Lions and Saints. In fact, I'll try to find that right now. Lions and Saints. You talk about this game. I'll just mention that the Saints offense has been terribly disappointing this year, and the Lions defense is the worst defense in the NFL points per game wise since week 7.
Yeah, so obviously the Lions not playing great defensively. I think the Saints are fun to watch offensively until they get to the 20-yard line, and then they just become totally inept. And if I'm saying, why don't we just give the ball to Taysom Hill a little bit more in the low red and kind of find ways to get him touches? But the Lions offense is going to be super fun to watch. It always is. And again, he might the offensive coordinator there, what's his name? Ben Johnson?
Yes.
Might be the head coach here soon, or might be up for an interview soon. So I think that game will be fun to watch for Washington fans to kind of see who the future play caller here could potentially be. And I think the Saints are a good football team. Defensively, they're good. Offensively, they're good. Again, just can they get their red zone stuff figured out? And that's the million-dollar question. But I like Detroit, even though their defense isn't playing well. So
yeah, also you think back to that game on Thanksgiving, and Dan Campbell goes for it on 4th down 5 times.
Yeah.
5 times, and they only get 1 of them. So, there's plenty more production there if they can be more efficient, get a couple extra first downs, even convert on some of those 4th downs, or just, kick a field goal or 2 as opposed to what they did. Let's see. Keenan Allen is active versus the Patriots, by the way. So, bad news for them. Good news for the Chargers. Falcons and Jets. This one feels fairly ugly. This is also a very Logan Paulsen game.
I like the Falcons.
I was surprised at how infrequently the Jets are running the football, considering all the quarterback problems that they've had.
Their offense is bad.
This game, though, good candidate to be over by 3:45 kind of game. Ton of running the football, not a lot of offense that you expect to be good in this game because the Jets' defense is still balling.
Yeah.
But obviously,
that's a great point.
Obviously, Atlanta is trying to figure out what they got offensively and how they can make it work with Desmond Ridder, and it's been such a mixed bag this year.
100%. And I think when he runs the football a little bit more, especially in the design quarterback run game, that offense gets considerably more dangerous. So I would probably lean into that a little bit more if I'm Arthur Smith, because I don't want him throwing the football too much, especially this Jets defense, like you said, which is very, very good. Not only do they have an excellent pass rush, they're awesome in the back end. And if they had any type of offensive support, this would be a much, much different game. But I think the Falcons, I want to say they're turning a corner, but they're very much like Green Bay for me. It feels like they're turning, right, and then they have this really bad regression game. So is this a regression game against a good defense? Possibly. But I do think that team is so close to being good. They're like if Kyler Murray was there, if Kirk Cousins was there.
Oh, yeah.
Put anybody you want there, they'd be awesome. It's just
if you can get a top 20 quarterback there.
Especially with Arthur Smith and the way he calls games, the way he thinks about football, and all the stuff he puts on the quarterback position. Yeah, man, that would be really, really dangerous. But, they don't have that. They got to kind of, figure stuff out with Desmond Ridder. But I'm rooting for the Falcons, let's say, in that game.
Yeah. By the way, both Jets running backs, Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, were questionable. They both are active today for New York. Cardinals and Steelers. As if this wasn't going to be hard enough for Pittsburgh or for Arizona on the road. T.J. Watt and company and the Steelers, as they have been defensively the last couple of weeks. Minka Fitzpatrick finally back for Pittsburgh, ready to go with that hamstring injury. Kyler Murray makes this team more fun to watch.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're good enough to really compete with the Pittsburgh team that typically finds ways to win no matter what, and obviously has a better roster today.
Yeah, I'm totally with that. And I also think the other interesting story there is, can the Steelers offense continue to be good like they were last week, or relatively good? Can they throw the ball over the middle of the field? Can they find easier throws for Kenny Pickett? Because statistically he does some good stuff. It's just about maximizing what he does since they fired Matt Canada. So while that game not super compelling because the Cardinals, like you said, are not very good, I'm curious to see if that Pittsburgh offense can continue to develop, because if they can, they could make some noise in the playoffs here.
And, of course, now I double-checked this, and Minka Fitzpatrick, let's see, is back today. Okay, so I thought I just saw an inactive that he was, but that was a couple weeks ago. Google, come on, be better. But Minka Fitzpatrick is good to go today for Pittsburgh. Broncos and Texans, low-key.
Good game.
Second best game of the day, maybe, behind, the big one.
Yeah.
49ers-Eagles that we'll talk about in just a few moments. But Broncos and Texans, Broncos riding this massive winning streak. Texans, one of the most surprising and exciting young teams in football with C.J. Stroud. Anthony and I really struggled when we were picking games this week to figure out who we were going to go. I honestly don't even remember who I picked on Friday. That's how close this game is.
It's going to be a close game, and I think, like you said, probably maybe the second or third best game of the day, depending on how you feel about Chiefs-Packers. I think I'm really excited to see C.J. Stroud, really excited to see Russell Wilson, really excited to see this defense for the Broncos continue to develop.
How have they flipped it, right? Because, they were – you were watching clips this week of Miami, and you saw the 70 points get put on Denver. And now they're good.
I think it's defensively just owning what you're doing, honestly.
That's what Ron's going to try to get this crew to
hopefully, do. That's what we're hoping for today, too. Yeah, I think owning what you're doing, dialing in, tweaking some stuff, getting guys in better spots. They traded Randy Gregory. I think that was a nice move for them. You get better, younger, kind of more hungry defensive ends in there that are playing hard, like Cooper for them. There was a clip that I watched a couple weeks ago of them against the Bears, and he looked like an absolute maniac, and I was like, that's the kind of energy you need. And I think that those types of decisions are big. Obviously, the offense for the Broncos playing much better, so I think they probably win this game, but Houston is just so explosive offensively, it's hard to say.
This game, by the way, I think the second highest total, or tied for second highest total of the day. The Washington game, actually, at least when earlier in the week, it still does. 49.5 is the total. I think they're anticipating most of that being scored by Miami, but we'll see. Broncos and Texans 47.5, as is the 49ers-Eagles game. Texans are favored by 3 at home, so Vegas telling you it's fairly even, obviously, on the matchup. Panthers and Buccaneers.
Not a good game. Yeah, not a great game.
First game without Reich for Carolina?
Yeah, Bryce Young, how does he look? Every week I'm watching that. He hasn't looked great. There's been flashes, but I want to see the consistent production. Can you elevate him? They fired the quarterback coach as well, fired the running back coach. can we get something for him to kind of encourage his development? And then the Bucs are fun to watch, because they got old Baker.
What will
out
Mike
there.
Evans do?
Yeah, because he's a baller. I mean, he's so good this year. But Baker's playing better, having a little bit of a career resurgence. So I always like to see that. And then that defense is so talented, but they're very up and down. So, I mean, they're 4-7 for a reason. I think there are some things to watch, but
I actually kind of wonder, would Mike Evans be a good fit here next year?
Dude,
you put Jahan in the slot. You get a bigger body.
I think so.
To go opposite of Terry. That's the one thing they haven't had here.
We've talked about that. Just getting more playmakers, bigger body playmakers, different skill sets. I think is always valuable. I don't know if you want to go, but I'm saying in the draft, finding a guy maybe you feel good about. Just more.
They got so much money.
More pieces, more playmakers. I think it's the right kind of. I think that's the right approach.
They could have $100 million in cap space.
Dude, that's wild.
Yeah.
Dude, this seems like such an appetizing job for anybody who wants to come in. Here, the Commanders, I'm saying.
Yeah. And also, by the way, your owner this week said there's no shortcuts to the top, only to 8-8, and he's not David Tepper. Yeah. So,
Did he say? What did he say? He didn't say that, did he?
Oh no, he didn't say that. I said that he's not David Tepper, but he legitimately said there's no shortcuts to the top.
I heard him say it's easy to get to 8-8.
Yeah, you want 8-8, I can get you that tomorrow, and he's 100% correct on that.
Yeah.
It's actually not that hard to go 8-8 in the NFL if your goal is to go 8-8. Your goal should not be to go 8-8. Browns and Rams.
I always like watching the Browns because that defense is fun to watch. Offensively,
although it is not as good recently.
Correct. Because their offense is terrible.
Yes.
Joe Flacco, baby. Let's get going there. Huh?
Joe Flacco.
Always love watching their right tackle, DeJuan Jones, because that's what
that was your guy.
That's the guy I'm into. He's played really good football for him. And then if they win this game, and who wins? The Philly wins. The Philly's in the playoffs.
There you go. So, meanwhile, the Rams trying to fight back and get into that last wild card spot. They've been good this year when Stafford's out there. The problem is keeping him upright, keeping him out there.
Dude, that offense is he's playing really good football right now.
Yeah.
Really I mean, I'm sure people are talking about it maybe in LA, but nationally, then you probably need to talk about how well he's playing more.
Yeah. I think because they took that pretty big dip when he was out, people are like, oh, well, the Rams are done.
Yeah.
Another lost season for Sean McVay.
And they're running the ball well, too, which is always fun.
Kyron Williams. Good God, that guy.
Oh, and
dude,
isn't
I lost
Myles
my
Garrett's
fantasy matchup because Kyron Williams was on my bench last week.
Did you? That was a mistake.
Yes, it was a huge mistake.
Fun
it was
fact,
an oversight.
Fun fact, mistake by you.
I got to make sure. I got to double check. I do this every time I go past the Rams.
I don't know if you want him playing this week, though, against Cleveland.
I sure do. I sure do. Cleveland has not been as good. They have given up some monster offensive games as of late after a historical start. They gave up? They gave up like 30-something a couple weeks ago to
Baltimore.
They gave up 29 to Denver last week.
Oh, yeah, but that was when their quarterback threw like 6 picks. Not 6 picks. That was an exaggeration. But they had their third-string quarterback came in and basically was like.
Who you think? Oh, I mean, Joe Flacco's their fourth string.
That is a great point.
So, the Colts put up a bunch of points on them. Seattle put up 24 on them. Like, they were awesome. The first 7 weeks or so of the season until that Colts game.
No Burrow for the Bengals. This offense is terrible. That offense is terrible.
Yeah, so they literally were on a historical run, schedule inflated, and then they played real teams, and it hasn't been nearly as good.
Also, is Myles Garrett playing? I know he had a shoulder deal.
Let's double check, shall we?
Yeah.
Is this game at 4 o'clock?
Yeah, but there's probably not right.
They're not going to. Whoa. Hello, computer. What are we doing? Cleveland Browns inactives. I think he was listed as questionable, and obviously we don't have the inactives yet for the game. But Myles Garrett, full participant, should go. So the shoulder was more precautionary, keeping him out of practice some this week. All right, tell you what, let's take a quick break, come back. We'll talk about 49ers, Eagles, Chiefs, Packers, and then we'll mention that Bengals, Jaguars is happening. That's next on the Take Command pregame show. We'll get back into Commanders and Dolphins in detail at the top of the hour, finishing up a look around the NFL. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you here on a Burgundy and Gold Game Day, the Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, continuing to, every time I look up, Logan, there's more people here, which is kind of how that works.
Which is good, yeah.
When the doors open at 11 and it's now 11:52, and this place will be jam-packed to the gills by 1 o'clock for kickoffs, especially you want like a nice place to watch on a terrible rainy day. Come on down to Tap Sports Bar. We unfortunately have to go to FedEx Field after this.
Yeah, I mean, I like going to FedEx Field.
I mean, I like it although I haven't seen the Commanders win a game there since 2019. So,
dude,
yeah,
is it true?
Yeah, the games that I have gone to.
That's rough.
Because they've only won one at home this year. Is the Arizona game. I was sick.
That's right.
They've lost every other game, and then 2019 they won 1 or 2 games at home.
Yeah, tough.
Not good.
Tough.
I think it was this weekend though. They beat Ron in Carolina in what was Ron's last game in Carolina at Carolina. The next week, I think they won again, and that was their last win of the season. And I was there for it because I was on the beat then. And then I just didn't go to any games at FedEx for a long time. And now I'm back, and they haven't won. Perhaps I'm the problem.
Yeah, for sure that's what it is.
That's the analysis.
Ban Craig Hoffman from FedEx Field.
I'm sure there's some people that would love to. 49ers and Eagles is the game of the day, Logan. NFC Championship game matchup. Like the last one, it is in Philadelphia. Niners, though, favored on the road by 3 here. Third game in 13 days for Philly is a tough, tall task. They also played an overtime game last time out.
Yep.
San Francisco's coming off the mini-bye. I get why the Niners are favored here, but it just feels like the Eagles always find a freaking way to win.
Yeah, but at some point it's like going to be a war of attrition kind of. You know what I'm saying? Like they've just played so much football the past couple days, or past like 2 weeks basically.
Yeah.
That Bills game, there's got to be an emotional letdown at some point.
I also think there's just a math element where it's like, is this team really about to go 16-1?
Yeah, no.
No, they're going to have to lose some. And Dallas next week as well for them. If they were to go 14-3, that feels perfectly fine.
Yeah.
This does not feel like a 16-1 football team. They've got to lose some time, and today feels like a good time.
Yeah, and there's no good time to lose, but it just feels like the matchup favors them. Kyle's that offense, they're going to be ready to rock and roll. And while Philly is very dynamic offensively, they're not overly nuanced. Defensively, they're going to kind of do what they do. And I just feel like Kyle is just going to have a field day with that, honestly. So I do think, like you said, Jalen Hurts just seems to find a way. They seem to find a way consistently to win. They match up really well, in terms of their offensive line with that vaunted defensive line of the 49ers. So I think it'll be a good game. But I just think the 49ers are kind of hitting their stride. Trent Williams healthy, Deebo Samuel healthy.
I
feels
think
like a San Fran game.
I think a key for San Fran today is don't let this thing be close, because if it's close, the Eagles will find a way.
Yeah.
You got to put this thing away and have it be a 2-score game in the fourth quarter where, Jalen's got to drop back a bunch against that defense. And, he'll throw a pick or two in that situation. Historically, he doesn't wind up in that situation very much. I think he's 30-5 now as a starter. He wins football games.
Yeah.
Are wins a quarterback stat? Of course not. But when it's that dramatic, clearly he's got a pretty big role.
Something to do with it.
In that. Then quickly, the final 2 games of the weekend, Sunday and Monday night, Chiefs and Packers. Kansas City 6-point favorites on the road at Lambeau.
Yeah, and I think this one, if Green Bay plays like they played on Thanksgiving, and maybe the week before, I can't remember exactly which game it was, but Christian Watson's playing better, Love's playing better, that defense stood up and did some really dynamic things. So I think there are some cool opportunities here for this to be a competitive football game if you get that version of the Green Bay Packers. However, if you get kind of the up and down, inconsistent.
If those were the ups and now it's time for a down,
then it's going to be a bad game.
I also think that, unfortunately for Green Bay, Kansas City might have figured some things out last week.
Maybe.
They finally scored in the second half. Offense looked better. The defense still looks as good as it has. The defense has carried that team all year to their 7-3 record, and the offense showed up last week and got them to 8-3. So I do wonder if finally, some of these young receivers for Mahomes, Rashee Rice especially, is
he's playing better.
Okay, I get it now. And if that's the case, then the Chiefs are a terrifying team for the rest of the AFC, which will include the also 8-3 Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 9.5-point favorites at home on Monday Night Football against the Bengals, who are obviously without Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So obviously not a very compelling game, but to me, I want Jacksonville to win by 10. Win by double digits. Be the team that we think you are. win this game. I feel like how many times have we watched them just kind of like
too many
sleepwalk through a game, win by 10. It's like have this be a decisive victory for you. Look sharp, play good football, and look like one of the best teams in the NFL. Like that's what I want to see from them this
for
game.
sure. All right, when we get back here on the Take Command pregame show, how does this Washington defense try to stop what is one of the most dynamic and interesting offenses in the NFL? It is going to be very difficult, but we will give you a roadmap next. It is the Take Command pregame show on the Team 980, 106.7 The Fan, Burgundy and Gold Game Day. Take Command pregame show, final hour here for us, but we got you covered all day long on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Denton Day, Linnell Willingham will have the Burgundy and Gold Game Day live show coming up, following us during the game, obviously. They'll join us towards the end of this hour for predictions and such, but Logan Paulsen, it's time to get back into the details of this one. The Miami offense is as potent of an offense as we have seen in recent NFL history. They have so much talent. Schematically, McDaniel and company do a tremendous job. And obviously, they do a lot of stuff that this Commanders defense has been bad at stopping this year. They generate explosive plays. They run the football extremely well. There is so much to talk about. And I don't know that any of it is fantastic for Washington. But if you dive in and you squint your eyes, if you're on the Washington staff, if you're, say, Christian Garcia, the young interim defensive backs coach that has a lot of responsibility with third downs on his plate this week on top of coaching the defensive backs. If you're Ron Rivera taking over this defensive play calling, what's your roadmap to get your guys in the best position to try and stop this Miami unit?
So let's start like super high and then work our way down. Okay. So I think when you look at the Miami Dolphins, I think it's probably one of the better kept secrets in the NFL is that their offensive line is not very good. The problem is how do you get to their offensive line? How do you let your rushers beat up on this group that's very well coached and very detail oriented and obviously execute really well in the run game, but from a pass protection standpoint have struggled at points this year. And so to me, I think like the number one formula when you look at the games they've lost this year, the defenses they've not pressed they've just been more aggressive to take away underneath stuff, which means that they've been really communicative with the safeties in the back end about where Tyreek Hill is, where Jalen Waddle is, pressed enough that like they kind of take away the quick game. Because if you think about this team, they really want to attack horizontally more than any other team we've played this year. And people say, oh, well, they've got Tyreek Hill, they got Jalen Waddle. Obviously, they can take deep shots. But in the context of that, what they're doing is they're spreading you out underneath to create throwing windows for like that 10-yard drift route, which we talk about all the time, right? So that if you can compress those underneath windows a little bit, it's really, really hard for Tua to make those throws. Like he's incredibly accurate, incredibly quick release, but if it's not there, he's not going to force it, which is good. You don't want your quarterback to do that.
Right.
Then you get into the teeth of letting your rush win. Like so when you watch Philly, they did that, the rush gets home. Buffalo, the linebackers for them did such an excellent job fast flowing to the football, dropping under drift throws, making him hold the football, letting the rush get home. Same thing with Kansas City. That seems to be the roadmap to victory. So the question then, can this team do that?
Right.
I think they can do it. I think they are talented enough to do it. The question that I am having a hard time with is, can you get that philosophy installed in a week? And that's where like Christian Garcia becomes really like a big focal point of this, because everyone you talk to in the building talks about how impressive he is, kind of in the same way you would talk about a guy that could be a defensive coordinator or a head coach one day, which I think is very, very telling. So obviously he's a great communicator, great teacher, intuitive football mind. Does his addition to that room kind of clear up some of the coaching questions that we had? You know, we always talked about some of the issues that we thought, man, are they getting this communicated effectively? Can he do that? If he can, on a short week with a simplified defensive structure, there's an opportunity here. You know what I'm saying? There's an opportunity for something to happen defensively that is probably unexpected by everyone in the country. It just, how confident are you in that happening, I guess is the question.
Right. Of course, the Commanders also beefed up their defensive backs room with Jim Salgado, who was most recently coaching at Michigan State, their defensive backs, but he's someone who's worked with Rivera for a long time. Ron actually said this week that he tried to hire him a while back, and he was in the college game, and the opportunity wasn't there. So that is someone who's some familiarity as well with the current scheme that Ron is going to try to, as quickly as he can and as basically as he can, install.
And so then also, one thing, we talked about the coverage, the rush. Can you maximize the rush was the other thing I'd ask you. Like, so are you blitzing? Are you line stunts? All those things, because it's eliminating those throwing windows, making him hold the football longer than 2.3 seconds.
Right.
But then you got to get home. So
right, and that was what I was going to say is, so they have, this year, the Commanders' pass rush has been mostly ineffective.
Yeah,
it has been.
And it doesn't really matter who's out there.
Yeah,
honestly.
tremendously ineffective since Sweat and Young left. They had a couple of games when those two guys were here that they were able to win with their talent, or the back end holds up a little bit more, and they had some big sack games.
Yeah.
Obviously against the Giants a couple weeks ago, they have the monster game, and they still lose, but they get a ton of pressure in that one. But it really has been like, hey, go win one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the time, they're just set hut. We're lined up in the same spot. We're trying to win. And it allows the offensive line to know exactly what's coming. There's nothing to prepare for. There's no change-up. It's all fastball, and the fastball has not been very effective.
Yeah.
So what can Rivera install again in the short notice to try to create some better, whether it's angles, stunt opportunities, whatever it is that you think he might do to generate more pressure if that back end can hold up longer than that first read?
Yeah, I think when I look at it, they've been effective creating pressure when they blitz, but it's just they don't blitz a lot. So in those man-to-man situations, like, be more aggressive to blitz is what I'd say. And it doesn't need to be 5-man pressures. It can be simulated pressures, 4-man pressures, overload pressures, all those things. And I think all those have been in. So it's just like taking the stuff you like the best, making sure you call it a little bit more. And then I think just encouraging the defensive line and the defensive line coaches to kind of promote more games and say, hey, man, in these situations, I want to see you call a game. Don't be hesitant to call a game. It'll help free you up, as opposed to kind of encouraging this one-on-one matchup. So I think it's multifactorial. It's more pressure, calling the pressure, because they've been good when you've called them. So just do it more. Help the guys in the back end with the coverages. And then and just kind of keeping it at the forefront of thought to say, hey, we can run more line stunts and things like that.
And by the way, they'll have to do that without James Smith-Williams again today. Commanders now starting defensive end still has that hamstring injury. James was on the show actually earlier this week. Sounds like it's starting to get a little bit better. Maybe after the bye week, he'll be able to get back out there. But he and Emmanuel Forbes highlight the inactive list today. Forbes, that elbow injury, Ron said this week, probably could play next week if they had a game. So after the bye, Forbes should be good to go coming back. Unfortunately, Alex Arma, who did practice on a limited basis this week, is out again today. So the short yardage stuff, which was way better when he was in, EB is going to figure out how to do that without a fullback. Then Julian Good-Jones, Curtis Hodges, Mitchell Tinsley, the rest of the inactive report. And that is your injury report brought to you by the Centers for Advanced Orthopedics. More physicians, more locations, more advanced care centered around one thing, you. Visit CFAortho.com. Obviously, without James, you've got Casey Tuhill on one side. Now F.A. Obata out for the season after that terrible injury a couple weeks ago for F.A. Have either of the two young guys really stuck out? And by the way, shout out to Josh Pryor, who'll be active today.
Nice.
There's a bunch of activations going on at the game today, one of which is their HBCU day. Josh, the only HBCU player on the roster, and he will be up today. It looks like as kind of, I guess, the 4th, 5th defensive end behind KJ Henry, behind Andre Jones Jr. Of those two guys, though, the two draft picks, what have you seen from them in their ability to project forward as either a rotational pass rusher, maybe even a starter, maybe not a super high-end starter, but someone that they can say, all right, we have Allen, we have Payne, maybe we have KJ Henry, and we need to go find a stud edge, and we'll be set on that defensive line. Has he shown enough to be potentially on that track?
I think so. I think he's shown more than I was expecting, especially given the preseason. It seems like he's found something. And, much like you talked about with Sam Howell, like, what is that? What's the extent of that? Like, what does that build out to? I don't know just yet, but I think you see a guy who's got good football instincts. He rushes the pass rusher okay in certain situations, and that's pretty good. Seeing any kind of flash of pass rush is super important. So I think that's been great, and he does his job. He does what he's supposed to do, and he's got a good intuition for it. So, right now he feels like a rotational guy, but, if he keeps kind of developing each and every week, maybe you say, hey, he could be, a guy who gets 25 snaps a game and feel really good about it. Andre, I think, shows that athletic potential, the length, the speed, the twitch. But again, there's like a lack of consistency there, which I guess is what I expected from him, because that's kind of what he's shown the whole time. You see a flash, you see something that's not great, flash, not great, as opposed to KJ, who's been just kind of very methodical in his approach. And I think pairing that, or at least right now, with Casey and that kind of consistent play from KJ is going to be really advantageous. It'll just kind of put you in a better spot, because that is like a good starting point for this group.
Right. And then, Casey's a very good football player, but can you get a stud edge on one side? that would be great. Casey, obviously a free agent, as is James. All the defensive ends that weren't rookies were free agents going into the year. They've obviously traded Young and Sweat away. We'll see what happens in the offseason with the other two. When we get back, it is Logan's favorite time of the show. We take our pick six from Friday on the Hoffman Show, and boy, did Anthony pick some doozies this week.
Did he?
And then we see what Logan's thoughts are. The pick six, the six players we think, or the six players or coaches that we think will have the biggest impact in the game on Sunday. We'll hear on a Sunday. We'll get Logan's thoughts on it next. It is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
We have a new submission to the Real Things Hall of Fame. The F-35 is a fighter jet that the military has. It is very expensive. Very expensive. The F-35 program costs the U.S. government / the military over $1 trillion. Like, this is one of the most expensive things in the U.S. government's budget is the program that makes these planes. Each one is incredibly valuable and expensive. And something happened during a training mission, but this jet leaves, they go on a training mission, and it's in stealth mode, apparently, and the pilot has to eject. So the pilot's like, I'm up out of here. Pilot lands relatively safely, has, I think, an injury or two that has to be tended to, but, like, is alive. But then they lost the jet. So the jet disappeared from the radar. The U.S. government's like, well, we don't know where the jet is. And so the Buford, which is the suburb not suburb, it's in South Carolina. It's by Charleston. Close enough. If people are actually from there and don't want to say that and want to say it's by Hilton Head, I know I grew up in the state. Leave my geography alone for the sake of the story, which I've now made less efficient by telling you all of those things because I can't help myself. Talk about a plane crash. Hey, we're back. So the F-35 gets essentially lost, and they're like, I don't know where this very expensive warplane went. And lo and behold, sometime the next day or later that day, it crashes somewhere, and luckily no one's hurt. But this $100 million plane is gone. Whoopsies, we crashed the plane. And this is an eyewitness account from a Charleston area television station of someone who heard the crash.
In the bathroom taking a shave, and I heard a screeching, between a screech and a whistle. I said, what in the world is this? And I heard a boom. Then my whole house shook.
White says he didn't realize it was a plane at the time, so he didn't call anybody.
The first thought came to me, I said, what's it, a meteorite coming out of space or something? And I said, well, if the airplane, it needed to be reported. Let the thing was flying just too low.
The F-35B airplane wreckage created an extensive debris field.
That boy, we gotta get a drop for the voice because it might be better than Steph Curry.
I was gonna say, I feel like we have to do a comparison. Can I pull this off with? Yeah, okay. So I had to compare or see if I had enough channels on the board to do this. But we got Steph Curry here. We got Charlie Brown here. And we got our mans here.
His is better, though.
I think his is the best one. His is definitely, it's not quite Charlie Brown. It's definitely close to Steph Curry, though.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Take Command pregame show live on a Burgundy and Gold game day from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Before we head out to FedEx Field, we'll have their virtually first Logan coming up in 15 minutes. Grant Paulson will join us, and then Logan and I will head out there where we will watch the game and then ultimately do the Take Command post-game show tonight live on YouTube at the Team 980 at 106.7 The Fan. You can catch us about 90 minutes after the final whistle. I'll be in the press conferences, the whole dealio. And then Logan and I will get up in a broadcast booth, set up our cameras and our microphones, and talk about the game no matter what happens today. Now, on Fridays on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, you can listen live 4 to 7. Also stream that, by the way, on the Team 980's YouTube page. We, at 6 o'clock, pick 6 players that we think will have the biggest impact on the game. We being myself, Craig Hoffman, that's me. It's the Hoffman Show. I host it. Very original name.
Do you really?
Yeah,
wow.
I know. It's crazy.
That's pretty cool.
And then Anthony Haney, my producer. We alternate. Anthony picked first this week. We call it our pick 6 at 6, Logan. And Anthony went very bold with his first pick because we take
I'm just looking at the list right
a
now.
look at
is he
this
odd?
list.
Is he odd?
He's the odd numbers of guys in front of you. Yeah, we then run it past Logan at 12:15 here on Sundays. And the first one is Ron Rivera.
Wow.
The defensive coordinator and head coach this week. Seems rather important. Not exactly a bold pick.
No.
But he's not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Ron, yes, has a big role in this game. Obviously, calling the defense, simplifying it like we talked about, getting guys on the same page.
You know what's funny is I think at this point Anthony's just trying to make you proud. And every time you pick EB, you're like, yeah, that's a great pick, Anthony. So he's like, what if I pick the other coordinator?
Did I say it was a great pick?
Pretty much every time. You're like, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, okay, I say that a little bit facetiously because obviously the coordinators are super important, right? And so Ron this week, and I guess Ron, I cut Anthony some slack this week, right?
Yeah.
Because it's Ron's in a new role.
Sure.
They're doing new things. There's all this simplification talk against the best or one of the most productive offenses in the NFL, depending on what metric you're looking at. So huge lift for Ron. But to me, that's from the week, right? Did he get everybody ready to go, and how's he call the game today? So, yeah, I'd say probably the most important person today.
I'm also curious to see, obviously it's more on his plate. Like, how do you handle the head coach stuff when you're also doing the defensive coordinator stuff? What did they shift around on game day in terms of roles? He used to, jokes aside, he just kind of stood there and managed the game with his arms folded, and everyone always yelled about how he looked so unengaged and whatever. But, called timeouts. He was in charge of challenges. I'm not saying he always did a great job with that stuff, but there is, the game management element.
Right.
When you're locked in on one side of the ball, you might want to be looking at Polaroids or the tablet now. When
Polaroids, what are you doing?
What year am I in? I don't know.
Did they ever use Polaroids?
Yeah, I mean, they were instant. They weren't like Polaroids, but they were the pictures instantly.
Just shaking it on the sideline.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't got it yet, guys. Hang on one second.
Andre 3000 out there with the theme song. Anyway, the point is, Ron's got stuff to do for the defense, and he's going to want to look at in a way that's different compared to before. And he might want to go talk in a defensive huddle and just abandon the offense. And so, Eric's got to be on top of all that stuff. And he's doing most of that stuff anyway. But in terms of what happens on the headset, all that kind of stuff is an interesting experiment for Ron Rivera today, one that he hasn't run since 2019. My first pick was Percy Butler. Percy has played good football as of late. Percy has also let the cap off big plays in every game as of late. And against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, the threat of that is extraordinarily high. So can Percy Butler continue the good play without the bad plays? That is the big question for me today in this more simplified system. And the funny thing is, I don't think the simplification is the key here for him. For a lot of guys, for St. Juice, for instance, for Fuller, there's a little bit more of, I think, the schematic changes that will impact them. Percy's played well, but maybe some of these tackles and stuff, he's just playing freer and faster, and he can get some kind of subconscious boost.
I like how you worded that. Good play without bad plays or something? You had a really nice way of articulating that.
If only we could remember it.
Yeah, that was good. But I do think Percy Butler would be really interesting in this game because of the big play thing you're talking about. Also, I do think the simplification will help him because there's times where you're watching, and I get to talk to Ron about how they run their cover two, and we're not talking about Percy specifically, but he's like, hey, I want them here. And so when I go watch the film and I'm like, hey, they're not here. Is that too much mental load? Is that coaching? And will simplifying it allow him to be in the right position to make plays on the football where he needs to? And that's something that I think will be really compelling. Does it allow him to take better angles to stuff because he's in better position? Like all that stuff. And like you said, he's a guy that probably could play, speed for speed, step for step versus this Miami offense because of his natural athletic ability. Can you take the rate limiter off and just be like, Percy, go get it? Get some hands on the footballs and make some plays. And so I think that's something that I want to see today because I do think you mentioned that the simplification is probably better for St. Jude's, probably better for Quan.
But maybe like the big play he gives up last week, where he's playing corner and it winds up being a post.
Yes.
Something like that.
Because he's like, I know all my rules and I know that I have to be here. So that's what I'm kind of hoping for is that it eliminates some of that indecision for him, and because of his speed and athleticism and skill set and his general mindset. Like when you watch him play, I love watching him play because he's fast, he's aggressive to the football. Can we get that version of him all the time and eliminate some of those bad plays like you described?
All right, number 2 for Anthony, number 3 in our list of pick 6, another bold choice, Sam Howell.
Sam Howell. I mean,
we have avoided, in fairness to Anthony, we have generally avoided Sam.
Sam, yeah.
But he's like this week with the pressure of Miami's offense, like you got to go out and ball to be able to keep up with them. So I allowed him to sneak 14 onto this list.
So yeah, I think Ron being his one is good, and it's going to be impactful, especially given the different situations. Sam, I think also too, because of this Vic Fangio defense, it's going to be a different type of pressure on him. And I think they've also got a bunch of, they have a bunch of very ball-savvy players in the back end of that defense.
We'll say Javon Holland out today, the hamstring injury preventing the man who had the 99-yard Hail Mary return for a touchdown last week against the Jets and has been just a tremendous young safety for them. He's out today.
Yeah, and then, Jalen Ramsey, 3 picks since he's been back. Yeah. He's only been back.
Unfortunately, he's still playing.
4 weeks, and Xavier Howard, excellent football player. So they have some good pieces in the back end. And Sam's going to be in charge of digesting and understanding what they're going to be doing in terms of roles and coverages and rules. So big lift for him today versus a very well-coached defense that's starting to play better, especially since Jalen Ramsey's back in the fold. And then I think one of the kind of bonuses for him is that the defensive line for Miami is a little banged up. So maybe that decreases the amount of pressure. You can see it a little bit more clearly. But it's still going to be a big lift for him. And hopefully and he needs like Anthony alluded to, like he needs to play good football for this team to win this game.
No doubt. Which is where I said number 4 is Brian Robinson. I, of course, as we've said, ad nauseum, for months, would like to see them run the football a little bit more. But even if they do not wind up getting a ton of running attempts, which I would not anticipate based off game flow, can you get him involved in the pass game a little bit more? Yeah. Can you get the ball in his hands? He is just one of your best playmakers, and I do think he is a bit of a barometer for them in terms of how the game is going. Can they keep him involved? And also just like purely, I could probably look at his snap count after the game and tell you whether it was close or not, because if it's a blowout, then Antonio Gibson's going to be out there. They'll be in all their 2-minute stuff nonstop. But you got to find ways to get Brian Robinson the football because he's just too darn good not to.
No, I agree, and I think, like you said, we want to see him get more touches in the run game. But I think, like you mentioned, the playmaking ability is something that people aren't talking about enough. He's been maybe your most dynamic playmaker offensively, most consistent in terms of finding big plays. So find ways to get him touches. I think that that's a very reasonable expectation. He's running the ball well when he's seeing it well. And he's making explosive plays in the pass game. And so I want to get him touches in the screen game. Can we get him good matchups? I forget what game that was. I think it was against the Giants potentially. He's running a choice route and dices the guy up for a 17-yard game. Give him some opportunities like that. Don't sleep on his ability to be an athlete in space and catch the football and be dangerous down the field. So I like that one quite a bit.
I would say also don't forget about Chris Rodriguez, though. He's been a forgotten man the last couple of weeks. And, part of it is they don't rush the ball a ton, but he's been good at it. And that game where he had the fumble, he was averaging 9 yards a carry.
Yeah.
Don't
been
give
a
up
very,
on him.
very pleasant surprise in terms of his production.
For sure. All right, and then Anthony's final. So we got the head coach / DC, the quarterback, and now we got the $70 million man, Terry McLaurin, on the we need some big plays theory, and Terry is the guy to do it.
Yeah, and I don't know. He kind of falls in the Brian Robinson category of me, as you'd like to see him get more specific types of touches, right? You want to see B-Rob run the ball more. You'd like to see Terry get more kind of game plan friendly touches. I don't know if you're going to get that. So can he win matchups against this secondary? And that's the big question. You paid him like a number 1. can he execute like a number one? And I think that's a big question, and he's going to need to play well. So, I mean, I think he's drawing a really tough matchup, so I think the ball is going to go elsewhere, most likely. It's probably going to go to Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel, Jamison Crowder, Jahan potentially, I think, because I think Terry's going to have a tough time with some of this stuff. Because
I mean, Terry is a number one. Jalen Ramsey might be the number one.
Yes, correct. And I think that's going to be a very, very challenging situation. I don't think they're going to match him. So can you move him around the formation and find good matchups? Again, I'd like to see that, but they just haven't done.
Yeah, Howard's no slouch on the other side either, so it's going to be tough. My last pick and our last pick in this pick 6 and 6 was Jamin Davis. There's a ton of motion, a ton of misdirection, a ton of speed, obviously, in this Miami offense. Jamin needs to have a big day, and he's a guy that if he's allowed to just play free, play fast, theoretically he should be unlocked to be the guy that he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So can this new defense under Rivera unlock him? And the other reason I picked him too is you need to get some turnovers today. You can't just go drive for drive. And Jamin has probably been their best playmaker this year, whether it's the forced fumble against Russ against Denver, whether it's the pick on Bijan at the end of the Atlanta game. Like he has been, they haven't made a ton of plays. He's made a high percentage of them. Would love to see him get back in that turnover category today.
Yeah, 100%. I think you bring up a great point there. They have put the ball on the turf from a fumble standpoint 20 times this year. They've recovered the majority of them. They've only turned over 8 of them, but the ball is out. The ball is live. So, yeah, and when the games they lose, they do turn the football over. So can you capitalize on that? The first Buffalo game, couple picks, couple fumbles, totally changed the outcome of that game, right? So can you maximize those opportunities when the ball's out? And then Jamin and the linebackers in general are going to have such a big lift today. This run game's crazy dynamic. The running backs are crazy fast. They attack the perimeter, and they give you false reads and false looks, and this play looks like this play all the time. The play action works off the run stuff, and you have just to be so dialed in. I look at what Buffalo did with Milano and all those linebackers they have there, and they were excellent at stopping this stuff. Can we get Jamin and Cody and Kalik and Cam Curl when he's in the box to play like that? Because if they do, they give us a shot. If they can't, if it's too much window dressing, if there's too many different looks, it's going to be a long day for that group.
No doubt. All right, that's our pick 6. We'll see how they do tomorrow, 6 o'clock on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. When we get back, Grant Paulson joins us live from FedEx Field.
I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman. Yeah. And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30-yard gain. So we were all fired up. And then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So, like, 2 plays later, we're running again and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh, man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him. And I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like, he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into, like, mist. And he, like, swung me. And I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh, my gosh. And, like, I went back and watched the film. And it was crazy how quickly he was able to, like, do his little basketball weave. And then, like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this, but he does a really good job of, like, kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So, like, he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick, like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to, like, think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like, there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day here from Tap Sports Bar, which I feel like just exploded in the last 5 minutes here.
Well, it's getting close to kickoff, right?
That is how that works. See how FedEx Field is doing. We head there now with Grant Paulson, of course, host of Grant and Danny, 2 to 6:30 weekdays on 106.7 The Fan. GP, what's up, man? How are you?
Greetings from a wet and a foggy FedEx Field, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing well. So this line, Grant, is 9. The fog, the rain. How much of it has to do with that versus maybe the Dolphins aren't quite as potent as we remember them from the first month of the season? Like, do you think that the Commanders can actually keep this close and compete today?
I have a hard time seeing that. I think if they cover, it's going to be on the back door, on the back end, where they're down by a good bit and they come back, and I think they're going to throw it a lot. Sam Howell's projected attempts today is over-unders, I think, at 40 or 41, something like that. So I think they're going to have to throw the football. They're going to be playing from behind. So I could see them covering that number with a late touchdown or something. But do I think they're going to be within 7 to 10 the entire game? I'd be surprised. Very few teams give up the explosives and the chunks and the big plays like Washington does, and there's just nobody in the league that can strike up the band and go for 30 and 40 at a time like Miami. Prior to Thursday Night Football, guys, when DK Metcalf took that in route 75 yards for a touchdown, the top 5 clock speeds in terms of chip data this season were all members of this Dolphins team. And it was 3 different guys, by the way. It's not like it's all Tyreek Hill. Devin Achane, who's going to play today. Raheem Mostert is going to play today. Their top running back, both accounted for there. So the team speed's astronomical. It's something Washington struggled with this year. I think they're in for a long day defensively.
So with that said, we've talked about the stakes of these games all year long, and we obviously see Del Rio dismissed over the Thanksgiving break. Is there, like, if they do lose big today, like, I don't want to say, like, does it matter, but, like, does it feel more low stakes from an actual result standpoint, and we, like, really entered the evaluation phase for you? Is there more at stake here? Is there something bigger that we're missing?
No, for me, it's absolutely about evaluating the young players now. So it's a shame, just as an example, that Emmanuel Forbes is inactive. He's got an elbow injury. Would have been a really, really cool opportunity to see what he looked like against elite weaponry and a great scheme offensively. I think he's played better football since getting back on the field after being benched, which is not to say a lot. Obviously, it was a real struggle for him early and at the middle of this season, but you want him on the field for games like this. I think Benjamin St. Juste is an interesting guy. I really like St. Juste. I think he's around the ball constantly. He gets flagged a lot because he's physical and generally coverage is fairly tight, but he does give up a lot of targets and catches and receptions. I think today's a big day for him. I'm really interested in Percy Butler the rest of this season. He's a fast, physical player who they drafted in the 4th round who's getting to play a lot with Derek Forrest hurt. I think guys like that, to me, in the next several weeks are must-see TV. Like, this is why we're doing this. So I love the matchup today from a kind of an evaluational standpoint, and that's really what matters the most. I am also curious just conceptually to see if they do much different with Rivera. You know, that would make me wonder, was he inclined, or maybe at different points, did he suggest things that Del Rio just decided he would go down? I don't know. I mean, is he going to be more aggressive? Are they going to blitz more? Are they going to do more different looks on the back end in terms of coverage? I think we're going to get all those answers here in about 25 minutes.
I mean, what would you, Grant? Well, I mean, obviously with Ron taking over play calling, what would you like to see from that group today? Like, would you?
Well, yeah, I think generally, like the rest of this season, I want to see them be way more aggressive and blitz a lot more.
Yeah.
I look at what some units like Brian Flores, who blitzed more than anybody else in the league with Minnesota. You know, they were the worst defense in football last year. Their talent got worse. They lost a bunch of their best players, second and back end levels, and they're way better this year, just essentially based on being aggressive and making, I think, their secondary a lot better by getting the ball out of quarterback's hands. I think that would be a bad idea today, though. I'm not going to just ask, you know, guys to play in man, one-on-one. I'm going to probably have as many players in the secondary at times as possible. Tua throws 6. He's got 10 interceptions. He actually is averaging an interception per game since week 3, like over 10 weeks, basically. I mean, that's crazy. That's a 17 interception season. You don't really see that for a high-end quarterback. And last week, if you guys go back and watch the Thursday game against the Jets, I know that's a good defense, but consecutive drives where he had horrendous picks. One was a pick 6. The other one right after could have been. It was kind of a underthrown ball on the sideline. So I think you can pick him off and make plays and confuse him. So that would be my plan today. But as the year goes on, after this week, when you're not dealing with Hill and Waddle and some of the weapons and the speed that they've got on the outside, I would probably want them to just dial up their aggressiveness and send some corners and safeties and just try to get the ball out.
Grant Paulson with us from FedEx Field. All right, GP, rubber meets the road. Who you got, and what kind of game are we looking at today?
I will go with Miami winning the game. I think they cover that 9 that you started the conversation talking about. I think it's like, a 37-17 kind of game, something like that, maybe 37-20. I just think their offense is too much to handle. And with the rain, look, the field actually looks like it's in great shape. Obviously, they haven't been here in a couple weeks, and they had the tarp down all morning. But it's inevitably going to be a little bit of a wet track. It's kind of nasty and foggy and everything here. So I think this is the number 1 rushing offense in Miami. It's the number 5 rush defense. I mean, when the corners don't know where you're going and the receivers do, I think sometimes split conditions actually can benefit the receivers, even if it slows Hill down a little bit. So I still think they're going to be just fine doing what they want to do.
Yeah, I'm on the same page to preview our next segment with our picks. GP, see you in about, an hour by the time we fight through the traffic on the way there. Protect my seat at all costs, and I'll see you at FedEx Field.
There have been fireworks in the press box today, guys, when they announced the college football playoff.
Oh.
There was a lot of yelling and screaming and large reactions.
Gosh.
It's been quite a morning.
Who was the loudest and most obnoxious person?
I'm not going to answer that because you said obnoxious. If you just said loudest, I would have.
Who's the loudest?
Who was the loudest person?
I'll say Chris Russell.
Stunned.
Really?
Shocked.
He actually didn't make a noise. I tried to get him to talk about it, and he's like, I don't care. You guys are wrong. The defensive team should have gotten in. That's literally what he said.
Okay.
I said, this is going to be an awesome game now. And he's like, Florida State played great defense last night. You guys are idiots. I'm like, all right.
All right. Well, glad to know the more things change, the more they stay the same. Grant Paulson.
That's actually a quote for the record. I tried to bait him into a debate, but he didn't want to have one.
No, he picks his spots, that guy. Very, very, no, he's not very strategic and pointed. Sometimes he just doesn't feel like arguing. Anyway, that's Grant Paulson from FedEx Field. Thanks, GP, and see you shortly.
All right, see you, boys.
That is, again, Grant, host of Grant and Danny, as if you didn't know. 2 to 6:30 weekdays on 106.7 The Fan. We get back our difference makers of the game, our predictions as well. Denton Day will join us from our DC studios as we wrap up the Take Command pregame show here on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
Route on a no head and kind of get a feel for it. And so as you get to know them better and they get to know you, you kind of start playing that advanced like chess metric. And I think the familiarity breeds like a faster game quality because like I know exactly what this defense is. I know exactly how they're going to play this run. We ran it against them, 6 weeks ago. Let's see it again. And we ran it against them last year twice. You know what I'm saying? So you get a really good feel for that. And obviously, like the fans in the stadium are just a little bit more up. And so I definitely think the divisional thing is real. And you talk about it differently. You talk about divisional games in the week in a different way. So it's definitely something that's 100% real. And, in the context of the Giants, like for whatever reason, they just have a good feel for this team. They have a good feel, good opportunity. Like, in our Take Fives, we talked about some Giant stories. Like I felt like during early in my playing career, I had a really good feel for what the Giants were doing. Like, I don't know what it was. When I went in that game, I just felt like I knew them really well. And sometimes when the Giants play the Commanders, it's like they just have a good knack and feel for kind of the holes and the wrinkles in the defense and ways to scheme stuff open. So I think divisional games are so fun. They're so fun to watch. They're so fun to play in. And I think they're fun to talk about because, like you said, even in this game where, we're going to talk about the Giants here in a second, Giants aren't a very good football team at the moment. Like, I don't know. And like Santana Moss is this is one of my favorite things he does. He's very consistent with his points of analysis. And anytime we're playing a divisional game, he's like, you can't count the other team out. And I think that's 100% accurate. And so whatever the record is, however bad the Giants have played, like this team, the Commanders, need to come and like put their best foot forward and just say like, we are the better football team, we're the better roster, and play like it. And I think ultimately that's what this game comes down to.
Take Command pregame show wrapping up on a Burgundy and Gold game day with Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman here at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Back in our DC studios, we find Denton Day who of course is the host of the Burgundy and Gold in-game
Wow. There you
show.
go.
Yeah. Occasionally the Take Command pregame show, like last week on Thanksgiving. Denton, you didn't have to work too hard for that 30 minutes, did you?
I mean, I put in so much work, guys. The amount of research I did for that 30-minute sprint, you wouldn't believe.
I have no doubt. You really had to figure out how to move around your kitchen and get around the side dishes to get to your Comrex to be able to do that in between plates.
Yeah, and I had a lot of input from the family. They were giving me their Commanders hot takes, which is always a
fun thing.
Oh, what was
perspective.
Okay, now we're in. What was the best Day family hot take?
Let's see. There were people that really liked Ron Rivera still, and I was like, I don't know about that, guys. I don't know if his future is going to be very long here after this season. Somebody brought up Carson Wentz, which I immediately left that conversation. I was
Smart.
Good. I can't handle this one. So I think those are the only two that stuck out.
Carson Wentz, were they like they want him back, or like what was the?
I would assume that's what it was, but
Okay.
as soon as I heard the name,
conversation.
I was like, this is, I got another plate to get. I got literally anybody else to talk to after this. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do this one.
That's rough. All right, we see the genetics are strong for the ability to have a take in the Day family. Excellent. Denton gives us great ones, and we'll give you excellent analysis during the game. And he always joins us at the end here of the Take Command pregame show for our difference maker of the game, presented by Zips Cleaners. Zips Cleaners knows that looking good makes all the difference, whether on the field, on the job, or wherever life takes you. At just $3.29 or less per garment, we make it easy and affordable to look your best. Find a Zips near you at zipscleaners.com. Denton Day, your difference maker of the game before we get to our final predictions.
Am I allowed to list a scheme as a difference maker?
Sure. Let's get creative.
Yeah.
Whatever the scheme is that Ron Rivera is going to cook up, his first time in years of calling defensive plays, to stop number 10. It's not going to be one person. At least I hope the solution isn't going to be just one person. Say, hey, we're going to put you on an island with Tyreek Hill, whether it's St. Juste or whoever. That would be a losing way to handle this afternoon. So whatever scheme they come up with, and maybe that is just getting pressure on the quarterback and throwing Tua off of his rhythm, because as we've watched Miami, it seems that offense is very rhythm-based and timing-based. But whatever they have concocted to defend Tyreek Hill, that is going to be the difference maker. If it works, the team will have a chance. If it doesn't work, let's just hope they don't hang 70 on the head of the defense.
Yeah, which sounds preposterous until you remember that they did it in week 2.
Dude, could you imagine if they put up 70 in this game?
I mean, I do think that like the calls for heads on sticks is quelled. You give up 70, that's gonna be a loud bye week.
You
All right,
just
Logan.
got me so anxious now. I don't that.
Look, it's only happened once.
Yeah. Okay. So for me,
it's difference maker.
For me, it's I'm gonna say like Cody Barton, Jamin Davis. Can we like pair them together?
Sure.
I think
if Denton can pick a scheme, you can pick 2 players.
Yeah, I just really think those linebackers are going to have such an important impact on this game. The run game, the angles they create, the motions, where is my eye discipline at? They run that cheeky little RPO kind of pass play that they've got. I got to be super disciplined if I'm the hook player there. So much resides on them getting, when it's play action pass, getting in those throwing windows, forcing them to hold the ball. So much is reliant on them today to be successful. So if they have a good game, I think we got a shot. But if they are in a blender out there from the jump, it's going to be a very, very long day.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think the ability for Jamin, but Cody could do this too, obviously, to force a turnover. I think you need multiple today if you want to have a chance in this one. I think that, if I look at difference makers, the interior of the Washington defensive line, getting some interior pressure. Tua's not the biggest guy. Can get your hand up, knock down a ball or two on some of that RPO, bail your linebackers out. And as you mentioned, Logan, maybe the best kept secret in the NFL is Miami's offensive line talent isn't tremendous as pass blockers. They have rushed the ball like crazy this year, and they do a good job of keeping them out of obvious passing situations. So I think that's a big one. But I'm going to actually pick a Dolphins player just to talk about something that we haven't talked about today. How about Big 9-4? How about Big Christian Wilkins?
I was about to say we haven't talked about him. We need to talk about him for sure.
So here's your opportunity, because I'm going to go Christian Wilkins as the difference maker. The Commanders have really struggled with great interior players this year. And so if you want to flip it and make me pick a Commanders player, Tyler Larson, Chris Paul,
He'd line up over Sam Cosby.
Yeah,
most
but
likely.
I mean,
but he moves around.
Yeah, moves around. You know, they got to pass off the stunts if he twists inside. So those three against Wilkins is a monster matchup. And I'm really curious to see what Miami does without Jalen Phillips. Do they try to feature Wilkins a little bit more in terms of how they scheme up some of their pressure? But he is a tremendous interior player. That is a thing that has given Washington great struggle this year. How do they handle him? He is probably a difference maker today for Miami.
That is a fantastic take. I think that's 100% on point. He's very disruptive. He's tackle leader. He's pressure leading. You know, like he's not quite Dexter Lawrence good, but he is very good. They run that little TT stunt inside, and he absolutely murders on that in terms of creating pressure. They understand how teams are sliding protections to him, and they know how to disrupt it. So I definitely think those three dudes inside, Chris Paul, Larson, and Cosme, are going to have to be really dotting their I's and they're crossing their T's, dealing with a talent like that inside. So he can be very disruptive. They're second in the NFL after New York in terms of unblocked pressures, and they're not blitzing a ton. It's all off of TTs and stuff like that inside, so making sure you handle that's a big deal.
Yeah, TT, so a tackle stunt, so they try to switch places or pick for each other, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that leads us to our predictions for the game. Denton Day, what say you?
You know, I do think the team's actually going to keep it closer than many people think. I do not think that Miami's going to hang 70 on the defense. I've looked across. I mean, Monday would be one of the best or worst days in our market if they hang 70 on this defense. But I do think they'll keep it close. So I'm going to go 34-28. Washington loses, but it's at least a fun game that we can kind of see a little bit of flashes of Sam Howell.
And you also have a cover there for those that are interested in those kinds of things. Logan?
Gosh, I mean, this is really, really challenging. We've stopped doing predictions on the other show that I do, just FYI, because it's so hard to do these picks.
Logan, this isn't that other show that you do.
Correct.
This is this one.
This is this one. I will say there's too many what ifs for me to pick Washington, right? What if they stop Tyreek Hill? What if they slow down the rush attack? What if Sam Howell comes out and balls? I hope that they cover this. I hope that it's, like Denton said, it's probably going to be 35, 36, something like that, to 21, 28, something. That's what I'm hoping for, a game like that where you see flashes from the offense, you see something that is competitive, and you see the defense be a little bit more dynamic than they've been. That's what I'm hoping for. I will say that Miami's been a little bit sluggish the past couple weeks in terms of offensive production. Grant talked about the turnovers they had against the Jets. Those were bad turnovers. Maybe you get lucky there, and can you capitalize on it? And can we see that kind of maturity from this team? That's what I'm really hoping for today. But is there an opportunity for them to lose by 20? 100%. This offense is very, very explosive.
Yeah, that's what scares me. I'm going 38-24 Miami. I just think that Miami does all the things that Washington does not do well. Like they create big plays. They run the heck out of the football. They create interior pressure.
Yeah.
They got playmakers on the back end on their defense. Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff here to overcome. They're a great team. And so I think that what you're going to see is Miami ultimately pull away. Maybe Washington keeps it competitive for a while, but ultimately too much for Miami. Denton, thank you for joining us. It is your show from here, Denton and Company, for the Burgundy and Gold Game Day in-game show, a thing that I will eventually say correctly by the end of the season. This has been the Take Command pregame show. Logan and I will see you post-game on YouTube at 1067 The Fan and at the Team 980 for our initial instant reaction live from FedEx Field. So we'll see you then. Enjoy the game, everybody. For Logan, I'm Craig signing off from Tap Sports Bar.